The Millionaire CEO sighed, settling into his first-class seat, when a wailing toddler was placed beside him. Instinctively, he soothed the child, only to freeze as he noticed a familiar birthmark: his own son. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. High above the Atlantic Ocean, inside a first-class cabin bound for New York, a restless energy crackled like static in the air. Soft music played overhead, hushed conversations rose and fell, and flight attendants whisked up and down the aisle with practiced efficiency. For the most part, it was just another routine flight for those traveling at 30,000 feet. But for Millionaire CEO Lucas Anderson, perched in a plush leather seat with his ever-buzzing phone in hand, this journey would be anything but ordinary. From the moment the seatbelt sign turned off, Lucas tried to lose himself in business emails, mergers, new acquisitions, an upcoming charity gala. He was a man accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life, a mogul of unstoppable ambition. Yet no matter how hard he tried to concentrate, the shrill wail of a crying child 3 rows behind him kept interrupting his thoughts. Normally, he would have put on noise-canceling headphones or requested the flight attendant move him to a quieter seat. He liked his personal space, his calm, his order. However, something in that plaintive sob, so heartbreakingly earnest, made him pause. Why is this child so upset? And why can't I ignore it? Lucas pinched the bridge of his nose, scrolling through a never-ending list of meeting requests. He told himself he was far too busy to play hero with a random toddler. He had multi-million-dollar negotiations waiting on him in Manhattan. Time was not just money in his world, it was everything. Still, that child's tears seemed to burrow under his skin in a way nothing else could. Finally, with an exasperated sigh, he rose from his seat. Tugging at the lapels of his tailored suit jacket, he walked down the aisle toward the back rows, where the sobs were growing louder by the minute. Passengers looked up with mild curiosity. After all, who would expect the famed CEO, celebrated for his ruthless business tactics and for being consistently featured on the covers of finance magazines, to show any interest in comforting a little kid? But there he was, face set with determination, every bit as focused as he might be walking into a boardroom. And when he reached the row where the child sat, Lucas's heart did an unexpected flip. A small boy, perhaps 3 years old, was curled up in his seat, tears streaming down his cheeks. He had sandy brown hair, big hazel eyes red from crying, and a trembling lower lip that made him look heartbreakingly vulnerable. Next to the boy, a woman attempted to hush him, stroking his shoulder gently. Her face was turned away, hidden beneath waves of soft auburn hair. In that instant, Lucas felt a peculiar twinge, almost like recognition. Strange, he thought. Why does the back of this woman's head seem familiar? He cleared his throat softly. Is everything all right here? His voice, low and measured, carried a confidence that usually compelled immediate answers. The woman tensed, then turned, and when her eyes met Lucas's, he froze. Suddenly, the muffled hum of the airplane disappeared, the overhead lights grew dim, and it was as though the entire cabin vanished around them, because the woman whose face he now saw, large eyes glistening with tears, her expression etched with exhaustion, was Rachel Miller, the one woman Lucas had never been able to forget. 5 years. That was how long it had been since Lucas last saw her. They had parted on wrenchingly painful terms, fueled by misunderstandings and secrets too raw to face. In that time, she had disappeared from his life without a trace. Seeing her here felt like stepping into another lifetime. He stared, momentarily speechless, while the child's sobbing continued unabated. Rachel recognized him at once. How could she not? There was a flicker of shock, then hurt, then something else Lucas couldn't identify. She tried to speak but seemed to find no words. Instead, her eyes darted to the little boy, then back to Lucas as though apologizing. Or was it warning him? "Lucas," she managed finally, voice quavering. I didn't expect—" The boy hiccuped, tears still wet on his cheeks. Instinctively, Lucas knelt so that he was eye level with the child. "Hey there, buddy," he murmured in a soothing tone he hardly recognized as his own. "You having a rough time?" The boy sniffed and studied Lucas with uncertain eyes. Something flickered across his expression: shyness, curiosity, or maybe an unspoken connection. And in the periphery of Lucas's vision, Rachel's lips parted as though she was about to reveal a critical piece of news but couldn't quite bring herself to say it. "Is he your—" Lucas began, glancing up at Rachel. The question hung in the air. Lucas's mind spun with so many half-formed thoughts. Rachel's abrupt departure years ago, the rumors swirling among mutual acquaintances, the timeline that, in hindsight, might align just so. Could this be possible? Before Rachel could answer, the child let out another sob and Lucas refocused on comforting him. He gently ruffled the boy's hair, speaking in a hushed tone about airplanes and clouds and how sometimes even grown-ups get scared of flying. The boy quieted, drawn in by Lucas's calm presence. He blinked away the last of his tears and clung to a plush toy, listening as the stranger with the warm voice told him everything was going to be all right. Meanwhile, Rachel looked on, conflicted. She appeared torn between gratitude and worry. Finally, once the child had settled, she explained, "He's upset because we had a layover that lasted forever, and he's never flown so long before." Her words were strained, overshadowed by an unspoken tension. "Lucas, I appreciate you helping, but maybe you should go back to your seat." He stood slowly, noticing Rachel's trembling hands. His heart hammered in his chest. "You never called," he said softly, a swirl of heartbreak and confusion in each syllable. "I searched for you." Rachel swallowed hard. "I had my reasons." Lucas turned his gaze to the boy again, who was staring at him with a familiar intensity. "What's his name?" Lucas asked, his voice quiet. "Ethan," Rachel replied, pressing her lips together. "He's 3. She seemed to realize how significant those details were, how they might confirm Lucas's growing suspicions. "Lucas, you don't understand everything. Please believe me when I say I never meant to." Just then, the flight attendant arrived, politely inquiring if everyone was comfortable. She recognized Lucas, offering him a deferential smile typically reserved for VIP passengers. Lucas forced a nod, stepping aside to let the attendant pass. But as she moved on, he lowered his voice. "Rachel, we need to talk." "Not here," she whispered, glancing at the curious stares of nearby passengers. "And not now. Please, just leave us be." Lucas's mind whirred. Part of him wanted to demand answers, right here, right now, but the raw panic in Rachel's eyes stopped him. Instead, he tucked a business card into her hand. "Call me," he said, a quiet plea overshadowed by the authority in his voice. "We land in 3 hours. I'll be waiting at the arrivals gate." He glanced at Ethan once more, offering a gentle smile. The child returned it with a half-hearted wave, his small fingers curling around the edge of his seat. Lucas turned to go, but not before noticing a single tear sliding down Rachel's cheek. For all his corporate conquests and triumphs, Lucas felt powerless in that moment, burdened by the sense that everything he once believed about his life was about to change forever. On his walk back up the aisle, he hardly noticed the plush carpet or the glint of overhead lights. Passengers stole glances at him, but he saw none of it. Instead, he was flooded by memories of a love he'd never fully let go. He remembered the nights Rachel and he had spent gazing at the stars, dreaming of a future where their respective pasts didn't haunt them. They were both so young, so afraid. And then it all came undone, leaving him more guarded than ever, until now. Settling back into his seat, Lucas found that the next few hours dragged on like days. He could barely bring himself to look at the financial projections on his phone or the urgent messages from colleagues. A single thought consumed his every breath. Is Ethan really my son? And if so, why did Rachel keep him a secret? His heart clenched with guilt, curiosity, and a powerful longing to know the truth. For once, the unstoppable business magnate felt uncertain, as though standing on the edge of a precipice without any plan of action. All he knew for sure was that life as he knew it would never be the same. Not after those tearful eyes. Not after feeling a child's heartbeat so close to his own. Meanwhile, in row 29, Rachel cradled a sleepy Ethan against her shoulder. Her thoughts swarmed with regrets and hopes. She had evaded Lucas for years, convinced that was the only way to protect her child. But fate, it seemed, had a different plan altogether. The question was, would this unexpected reunion be a bridge to redemption, or a final confrontation with the secrets she desperately tried to hide? Stay with us, because this story has only begun. What truths lie in Rachel's past? Will Lucas discover a bond he never knew he needed? Keep watching, because what happens when that plane lands in New York might change their lives forever. The airplane touched down on the tarmac at JFK, its wheels screeching softly as the engines powered down. Usually, Lucas Anderson was the first to unbuckle his seatbelt and stride purposefully toward the exit, anxious to breeze through customs and get on with his busy schedule. But not this time. Today, he found himself glancing repeatedly at the back of the plane, where Rachel and little Ethan sat, waiting for their turn to disembark. His nerves thrummed with a tension he hadn't felt since making his very first multi-million-dollar deal. He needed answers. He needed to see them again. But as row after row of passengers shuffled out, swirling around him in a blur of carry-ons and crinkled boarding passes, Lucas didn't spot Rachel anywhere. Panic crept into his chest. Did she leave already? A frantic worry took hold. Maybe she'd slipped away to avoid him, just like she did years ago. Just as he was about to turn around and rush to the plane's rear, a small voice jarred him from his thoughts. "Excuse me, sir?" asked a flight attendant. "I believe you left a file folder in your seat." She extended a slim, expensive-looking binder, the one Lucas typically guarded as closely as his phone. "Thank you," he murmured, momentarily distracted. But once he took it, he wasted no time weaving through the crowd, drawn by a sense of urgency he couldn't quite name. He exited the jet bridge and entered the arrivals corridor, scanning the throngs of travelers. He tried not to look too desperate, but adrenaline pounded in his veins. Each passing second stoked his fear that Rachel had done it again, vanished with no forwarding address. He caught himself inhaling sharply, reminding himself that even if she had run, he would find her. There was no possibility he would let his child, his son, grow up without knowing him. At first, he almost missed them amid the sea of people rushing to baggage claim. Then he glimpsed a familiar auburn wave of hair and recognized the slim figure standing awkwardly by a set of chairs. Rachel. She looked tired, drawn with anxiety, but she was there, waiting. And sitting beside her, Ethan clutched an overstuffed teddy bear. The boy's gaze flickered across the terminal, wide-eyed at the chaos of luggage carts and overhead announcements. Lucas inhaled, steeling himself for what was certain to be a life-altering moment. Approaching them, he caught Rachel's wary expression. Ethan, sensing the stranger's presence, turned and brightened. "Mommy, it's the man from the airplane!" Lucas paused, kneeling just enough to be at the boy's eye level. "Hi again," he said, voice gentler than he'd intended. Ethan managed a shy smile, though his small hand clung tightly to Rachel's sleeve. Rachel gave Lucas a quiet nod. I didn't want to disappear on you again," she admitted, voice trembling. "I owe you, at least, some kind of explanation." Though thousands of travelers poured around them, exuberant families reuniting, business people hurrying off to connections, staff directing the never-ending currents of arrivals, an invisible sphere seemed to form around Lucas, Rachel, and Ethan. sealing them in a fragile bubble of unresolved emotions. "Somewhere private," Rachel agreed. She looked around, scanning the terminal's bustling corners. "I'm not ready to share this conversation with an entire airport." Lucas noticed a driver holding a sign with his name in bold letters. Typically, the plan would be to climb into a sleek town car, proceed to an upscale hotel, and bury himself in business calls. But the priority had shifted so dramatically that it barely felt like the same life. "I have a car waiting," he told Rachel. "Come with me. We can talk." A bead of hesitation flickered across Rachel's face. She glanced down at Ethan, then finally nodded. "All right." Moments later, the three of them slid into the back seat of Lucas's luxury sedan, separated from the driver by a tinted partition. It was a cozy, almost claustrophobic space, yet luxurious, with plush leather seats and the faint scent of cedar. Ethan sat in Rachel's lap, peering out the window at the skyscrapers looming in the distance. Everything about his expression radiated innocence and curiosity. Lucas found it difficult to tear his gaze from the boy. Each time Ethan turned his head, it felt like a mirror was reflecting aspects of Lucas's own features. The hint of his jawline, the arch of his eyebrows. He swallowed hard. "Rachel," he began, voice subdued. "I need you to tell me the truth. Is Ethan mine?" Her arms tightened protectively around the child. For a moment she didn't speak, as though gathering the courage to step across a line that once crossed could never be undone. Eventually, her lips parted. "Yes," she whispered, eyes glittering with tears. "He's your son." A wave of raw emotion crashed over Lucas. Relief, anger, regret, tenderness, all swirling in a potent mix that left him reeling. He pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose, exhaling in a low hiss. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice still husky. "Why keep him a secret all this time?" Rachel looked down, brushing an auburn strand aside. She glanced fleetingly at Ethan, who was absorbed in watching the cityscape. "You and we ended so abruptly," she said, each word fragile. "And after that awful fight, I got the sense you never wanted anything to do with me again. I tried to reach out at first. Then, when I discovered I was pregnant, She hesitated. "I was scared, Lucas. I was afraid you'd think I was lying to trap you. And I was alone." Lucas's jaw tightened. Memories flared. The screaming matches, the pointed accusations, the heartbreak that had culminated in her fleeing his life. He'd blamed her for so many things, but her words stung now, a tangible guilt creeping under his skin. "But I've spent years believing—" He trailed off, swallowing a surge of regret. "Did you think I wouldn't have wanted him?" She lifted her chin in a show of fragile defiance. "You told me once that family was a distraction. You said your focus had to be on your empire, and after the scandal with your father's business partner, you started shutting me out. I thought maybe you'd do the same to Ethan, or worse, try to take him away. So I ran." Lucas caught himself shaking his head slowly, waves of sorrow rippling through him. "I was wrong. Rachel, I said a lot of things I didn't mean back then. I was trapped in my own anger, trying not to show vulnerability. But this," he glanced at the boy, "this changes everything." For a moment, silence pressed in, broken only by the hum of city traffic outside. Ethan reached for his teddy bear, which had slipped to the floor, and Rachel helped him pick it up. The child was too young to fully grasp the tension swirling around him, but he sensed something was happening. Lucas forced a soft smile in Ethan's direction. The boy answered with a toothy grin that cut right through Lucas's composure. "I want to be in his life," Lucas said quietly. "I have a right, and so does he." Rachel nodded, relief commingling with lingering nerves. "That's why I stayed. I won't lie, I'm terrified. Our world is so different from his. He's never met you, never been introduced to your sphere." She breathed in as if bracing for an onslaught of cynics and tabloids. "But you deserve a chance to know him. And maybe I owe it to him to show him who his father is." Lucas's phone buzzed, lighting up with the name of a business associate. The ring felt jarring, an unwelcome intrusion on this deeply personal moment. He declined the call without a second thought, gently setting the phone aside. "My world," he repeated. "Yes, it's complicated, busy, surrounded by, let's call it intense scrutiny. But Ethan belongs in my life no matter how chaotic it might get." Rachel regarded him skeptically. "So you'll make time for him between board meetings and flights to Europe? This can't be a part-time fatherhood, Lucas. If you truly want to do this, you have to be consistent." A determined light flickered in his eyes. "I'm all in," he promised, "if you let me. I don't care about the cost, the time, the changes I'll have to make. None of it matters if I can get to know my son." He felt the weight of those words settle over him like a vow. For so many years his empire was his legacy. He built it to prove himself, to overshadow all those who doubted him. And now he realized that maybe, just maybe, there was something far more meaningful than stock prices or corporate expansions. Rachel sniffled, dabbing her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked to Ethan, then to Lucas, and gave a small nod. The air in the sedan felt heavy with unspoken feelings, resentment, regret, hope, an entire tapestry of a broken bond that might, with care, be repaired. "I'm staying at a friend's place," Rachel admitted. "Just for a few weeks until I figure things out. I had some troubles in London. That's where we've been living. Something about Ethan's medical checkups. And I decided we needed a fresh start. So, here we are." Lucas tried not to read too much into the mention of medical checkups, but it sparked a twinge of worry. "He's all right?" She forced a tiny smile. "He's fine now. I'll explain more later." Her words hinted at deeper complications she wasn't ready to reveal. The car pulled to a halt in front of a tall building, and the driver's voice crackled through the speaker. "Sir, we've arrived." Lucas realized that in his haze of conversation, he'd directed the driver to the prestigious five-star hotel he always used when visiting New York. It was a place of glass walls and polished marble floors, staffed with doormen in crisp suits. Rachel gazed up at the opulent facade, and her posture grew rigid. This is where you're staying?" Lucas felt the gap between them widening at her reaction. Of course she'd be wary. Their old relationship had ended abruptly, in part because of the disparities in their backgrounds. While Rachel had worked normal jobs, he was juggling an ever-growing array of posh residences and personal staff. "Just for now," he replied. "I have a penthouse in Midtown, but it's under renovation." She nodded, still uneasy, hugging Ethan close. "I'll think about letting you see him tomorrow. But for tonight, we should go. My friend's apartment is across town." A prickle of disappointment lanced through Lucas, but he understood. "Then at least let me have my driver take you," he offered softly. "It's safer, especially at this hour." Looking at Ethan, then back at Lucas, Rachel eventually relented. "All right." She turned to Ethan. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go see Aunt Sarah." Ethan climbed into his own seat as Rachel secured him, while Lucas swiftly climbed out, instructing the driver to deliver them safely to the provided address. He handed the driver a crisp business card with instructions to call him once they were dropped off. Then he turned to Rachel, who lingered on the curb. Their eyes met in a silent exchange of gratitude and lingering confusion. As he gently closed the sedan's door, watching the car disappear into the swirl of late-night traffic, Lucas felt an unfamiliar void open in his chest. For the first time in his adult life, he couldn't simply sign a contract or win a negotiation to fix what lay before him. Reconnecting with his child, and with the woman he'd once loved, required more than money or power. It required patience, humility, and a willingness to confront old wounds. Finally, he strode into the hotel lobby, greeted by staff who bowed and rushed to collect his luggage. But the typical satisfaction of such service felt empty. Riding the elevator up to his suite, he found his reflection in the mirrored walls. Was this truly the man he wanted to be? Wealthy, yes, but otherwise alone? Standing in his lavish suite, the city lights flickering through floor-to-ceiling windows, Lucas sank onto a leather sofa and closed his eyes, forcing himself to steady his rapid heartbeat. Tomorrow, he would see Ethan again, if Rachel kept her word. Tomorrow, he might finally begin a path he'd never envisioned: fatherhood. The night felt longer than any he had ever endured, but despite the swirl of doubts and regrets, a seed of hope glimmered in his chest. Somewhere across the city, the little boy with sandy brown hair slept, possibly dreaming of airplanes and teddy bears, blissfully unaware of how deeply his presence had altered an entire future. The morning light filtered through the wide hotel windows, illuminating the opulent suite where Lucas Anderson stood. He had barely slept. Despite the luxurious king-sized bed and the hush of the city's early dawn hours, the events of the previous evening looped non-stop in his mind. Rachel's hesitant confession, Ethan's curious eyes, the revelation he'd never dared to imagine. A child. His child. He walked across the living area, past designer furniture that might as well have been invisible in his current state of mind, and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's skyline. Normally, this view invigorated him. Today, however, the city's gleaming towers felt cold, as though mocking the turmoil roiling inside him. For the first time in years, he wasn't strategizing about mergers or analyzing sales reports. He was thinking about fatherhood, about how to navigate a relationship he'd never prepared for. His phone rang, cutting through his reverie. He snatched it off the marble coffee table, heart pounding. "Hello?" "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," came the courteous voice of his personal assistant, Marjorie. "I have your schedule for the day, plus the contract drafts from Tokyo. Also, the CFO from your London division wanted to confirm next week's conference call." Lucas closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. He pictured Ethan's small face, the boy's shy smile. Strange how, in less than 24 hours, that child had become more significant to him than any corporate empire. "Marjorie," he said carefully, "reschedule or delegate everything. I won't be in the office today." A brief pause. "Everything, sir? Are you certain?" "I am," he confirmed, ignoring the tremor in his voice. "Have Damien handle the Tokyo negotiations and let the CFO know I'll coordinate by email. Right now I have personal matters to attend to." Another pause, longer this time. In all her years working for Lucas, Marjorie had never heard him step away from business for personal reasons. "Understood, Mr. Anderson. I'll handle it." Ending the call, Lucas felt a surge of apprehension. By pushing aside obligations, he was doing something he'd once deemed unthinkable. But a stronger conviction had taken hold. Discovering who Ethan was, who he might be as a father, meant more than any contract or investor meeting. He set down his phone and went into action. First, he showered and dressed in casual clothes, something he hadn't done in months, maybe years. Gone was the usual tailored suit. Instead, he slipped on dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, and comfortable shoes. Catching a glimpse of himself in the mirror, he hardly recognized the man who practically lived in pristine suits and polished shoes. A fleeting insecurity lurked. Would Rachel mock this new approach? Would Ethan find him approachable? He shook off the doubt. This wasn't about changing who he was. It was about showing them that he could adapt, that he truly wanted to step into their world. A soft knock sounded on the suite door, followed by the rolling of a room service cart. He had forgotten he'd ordered breakfast. The waiter laid out pastries, fresh fruit, coffee. Lucas offered a polite thanks, but his stomach churned with nerves too fierce to allow much eating. Still, he forced down a few bites. He needed energy. He had one shot to prove himself to Rachel and Ethan, and he wouldn't let hunger or jitters get in the way. Half an hour later, he found himself stepping into the back seat of his car, the same polished sedan that had ferried them from the airport last night. "Good morning, sir," the driver said, tipping his hat. Lucas nodded. "Morning. We have an address in Brooklyn. I'll send it to you now." He texted the address Rachel had given him, her friend Sarah's place. As the car navigated Manhattan's frenetic streets and crossed into Brooklyn, Lucas's pulse quickened. This was it. He was about to see Ethan again, not in the artificial hush of an airplane cabin or the tense hush of a hotel car, but in the real world, the everyday environment in which the boy actually lived. When they arrived, the building stood in stark contrast to Lucas's typical surroundings. It was a modest, brick complex near a stretch of local shops and a small neighborhood park. The sidewalks were lined with parked cars, some in need of repair, and children's bicycles chained to fences. This was a far cry from the gleaming towers and private elevators he was used to, but somehow the unpretentious vibe calmed him. People walked dogs, children played hopscotch. It felt real. He stepped out of the sedan, instructing the driver to wait a few blocks away. He didn't want the imposing black vehicle to overshadow the moment. As Lucas approached the buzzer, a ripple of anxiety swept through him. Would Rachel regret agreeing to let him visit? Would Ethan be wary? With a shaky hand, he pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B. Minutes later, he heard the faint click of the door unlocking. He climbed 2 flights of narrow stairs, aware that each step brought him closer to a life he once missed out on. Rachel met him at the threshold, wearing simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she looked more refreshed than yesterday, though tension still shadowed her features. "Hey," she said softly. "Hi," Lucas replied, stepping over the threshold. The apartment was modest but neat. A few moving boxes stood by the wall, half unpacked, their contents spilling out. A faint aroma of coffee lingered, and he saw 2 mismatched mugs on the small kitchen table. Despite the small space and the obviously temporary living arrangements, it felt cozy. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Ethan. The child stood in the living room, wearing blue pajamas adorned with rocket ships. His hair was tousled from sleep, and he clutched a well-worn teddy bear. Upon seeing Lucas, Ethan's eyes lit with recognition. "You came," the boy said, voice tinged with excitement and a bit of shyness. "You're the airplane man." He inched forward, always keeping the teddy close. Lucas crouched, matching Ethan's height. "I did come," he said. "I told you I would, didn't I? You said you had to talk to Mommy about me." Lucas flashed a gentle smile, though his heart tightened at the boy's directness. "Yeah," he replied. "Your Mommy and we're trying to figure out how I can be in your life more often so I can get to know you." Ethan considered that, hugging the teddy. Then he held the stuffed toy out toward Lucas. "Do you like teddy bears?" The sincerity of the question made Lucas chuckle softly. "Yes," he answered. "I do, though I haven't had one in a long time." Ethan fiddled with the bear's ear. "Maybe you can borrow mine sometime." Emotions surged in Lucas's chest. Gratitude, heartbreak for the years he missed, and a rush of protectiveness so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. He reached out and gently ruffled Ethan's hair. "I'd like that, buddy." Behind them, Rachel cleared her throat. "Ethan," she said, "why don't you show Lucas your new coloring book? I need to talk to him for a minute in the kitchen." She waited until Ethan trotted off into the adjoining room, then gestured for Lucas to follow her. The kitchen was small, with narrow counters and a tiny dining nook. She motioned for him to sit at the table across from her. On the wall was a calendar marked with notes about Ethan's doctor appointments. Lucas's gaze caught on them. 2 more visits in the coming weeks. "How is he really?" Lucas asked, tone gentle. "Last night you mentioned some medical checkups." Rachel clasped her hands, the tension in her knuckles visible. "It's not a crisis," she said quickly, as though to reassure herself. He had some respiratory issues a while back, mild asthma, they said. We had to do some tests. He's fine, but the doctors want to monitor him. That's part of why I left London. It got too expensive and—" She paused, swallowing a knot of pride. "I was struggling with health insurance coverage. Sarah offered me a place to stay until I could figure out a stable job and get him the care he needs here." Lucas breathed in sharply. "So, all this time you've been alone, handling bills, doctors, everything by yourself?" A flash of defiance crossed her features. "I manage," she insisted. "I've always managed." His chest ached. He had spent money so lavishly, millions allocated on expansions or branding strategies, while Rachel faced medical bills without support. He couldn't change the past, but perhaps he could help now. "Look," he murmured, "you'll never have to handle that alone again. Let me help. Doctors, specialists, anything Ethan needs." She shook her head. "I'm not going to let you swoop in and fix everything with a blank check. We both know that's not enough to be a father." "I know," Lucas conceded, "and I promise you, money is just one piece. I want to be there for him. Doctor visits, preschool events, everything." Her gaze softened, though caution lingered. "I want to believe you," she said, "because if you decide to walk away, he'll be the one who gets hurt. I can handle heartbreak, but he's only 3. He adores you already." The air in the kitchen felt heavy. Lucas reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. "Rachel, if I'm committing to fatherhood, I'm doing it with my whole heart. I'll need your help navigating it, but trust me, I'm not going anywhere." A moment passed in silence. Then Ethan peeked in, waving a colorful book of cartoons. "Lucas, see?" He flipped through a few pages he'd scribbled on. "I draw spaceships." Lucas stood, grateful for the interruption that dissolved the tension. He walked to Ethan, kneeling beside him. The boy's art was bright and messy, bursting with imagination. Lucas smiled. "You like space, huh?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "One day I'm going to go to the moon and see aliens." Lucas nodded back in equal seriousness. "Well, if you do, make sure you tell me all about it, okay?" The child giggled, standing on tiptoe to show Lucas a half-crumpled sheet with a rocket. "Okay." Then, as if struck by a sudden thought, he looked from Lucas to Rachel. "Mommy, can Lucas have lunch with us?" Rachel hesitated, glancing at Lucas. He raised his eyebrows, silently hoping she'd say yes. Her expression eased. "Yeah, sweetie, I think that's a good idea." Ethan beamed, scuttling away happily, already rattling off requests for macaroni and cheese or maybe hot dogs. Watching him skip off, Lucas felt a warmth bloom inside his chest. This child was so open, so unguarded, so ready to share. And it hit him how extraordinary it was that Ethan would trust him so quickly. Rachel moved toward the small fridge, gathering ingredients that might suffice for a simple lunch. Lucas stepped up, unbuttoning his sleeves and rolling them. "Need help?" She arched a brow. "You help in the kitchen?" He allowed himself a soft laugh. "I know it's not my specialty, but I can follow instructions." They set about preparing a meal in a comfortable hush, Ethan gleefully jumping in to hand them utensils, though more often he'd get distracted by scribbling space aliens on a notepad. Steam rose from a pot of pasta on the stove, the scent of melting cheese filled the cozy apartment, and the three of them made small talk about cartoons, favorite foods, and, to Lucas's quiet delight, the silly jokes that only a 3-year-old could find endlessly hilarious. When they finally sat down at the table, Lucas and Rachel seated side by side, Ethan across from them, an unlikely peace descended. The child babbled about everything from airplanes to the shapes of clouds, occasionally feeding his teddy bear imaginary bites of lunch. Lucas found himself enthralled by every word, every giggle. At one point, Ethan piped up, "Lucas, do you have a daddy?" Lucas froze, the question catching him off guard. Rachel looked down, as though remembering the strained relationship Lucas once had with his late father. He inhaled. choosing his words carefully. "I did, Ethan, but he's gone now." "Mine is gone too," Ethan said, glancing at Rachel. The room hushed. Ethan knew that his father hadn't been there, until now, and perhaps he was trying to process the fact that this man across from him might fill that role. Lucas swallowed the hard lump in his throat. "Well," he said softly, "I'm here now if you'll let me stay." Ethan gave an enthusiastic nod as if accepting him without question. In that moment, Lucas felt a rush of gratitude so powerful it nearly brought tears to his eyes. He'd always thought his greatest achievements were hammered out in boardrooms and brokered through financial wizardry. Yet none of those triumphs held a candle to the light in Ethan's eyes. Across the table, Rachel caught Lucas's gaze. 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. They both knew the road ahead wouldn't be simple. The past was littered with pain, distrust, and missed opportunities. But for the boy happily kicking his feet under the table, maybe they could try. Maybe together they could build something that resembled family. "Thank you for letting me stay for lunch," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't hide. "This means more to me than either of you know." Rachel just nodded, blinking away tears she refused to let fall. Then she mustered a smile for Ethan's benefit, who began telling a story about flying dragons. Lucas listened intently, slipping a casual arm behind the back of Rachel's chair. He knew there would be obstacles. The press discovering Ethan's existence, shareholders raising eyebrows at Lucas's sudden paternal commitments, the tension between him and Rachel that still needed resolution. But at that very moment, the only thing that mattered was a small kitchen table in a modest Brooklyn apartment where, for the first time in his life, Lucas felt at peace. Sunlight streamed through the window of Sarah's small living room later that afternoon, casting golden patches over the worn couch and the scattering of Ethan's toys. The savory smell of lunch still lingered in the air, a reminder of the surprisingly peaceful meal they'd just shared. Lucas leaned against the kitchenette counter, arms crossed, watching as Rachel helped Ethan tidy his coloring pencils. A quiet sense of warmth suffused the scene, a calm that felt almost too fragile to last. "Ethan," Rachel said, pointing to a plastic bin in the corner, "put your crayons back before they roll under the sofa." Ethan hopped over cheerfully and began dropping them in one by one, counting aloud in a sing-song voice. It was clear he was proud to have Lucas as an audience, and Lucas, for his part, stood captivated by every small gesture. At one point, the boy waved a blue pencil in his direction. "Want to help me?" he offered, eyes shining. Lucas glanced at Rachel, who gave a slight nod of encouragement. He walked over, knelt down, and picked up a few stray crayons off the floor. "Sure, buddy," he said, handing them to Ethan. As they tidied together, he marveled at how natural it felt, like stepping into a life he should have had from the start. Once the last crayon clattered into the bin, Ethan raced off toward the window, drawn by the shouts of neighborhood kids playing outside. The bright grin on his face was pure childhood delight. Lucas let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He turned to Rachel, 1,000 unsaid words wedged between them. "I can't pretend the last few hours haven't changed my perspective," he admitted, voice low enough that Ethan wouldn't hear. "It's like meeting a part of myself I never knew existed." Rachel's gaze rested on his face. She looked tired, but something in her posture was more relaxed than before. "I was scared to let you in," she replied, her tone steady. "But seeing you with him, I'm starting to think maybe I made it harder by shutting you out." Before Lucas could respond, a knock at the door startled them both. Rachel's brow furrowed. "I wasn't expecting anyone," she said, exchanging a glance with Lucas. Carefully, she went to answer. Sarah, the friend who owned the apartment, stood in the doorway, balancing a heavy grocery bag on one hip. She was petite, with short curly hair and a ready smile, but right now her grin carried a questioning edge. Her gaze swept over Lucas, who hovered in the background. "Well, well," Sarah said, stepping inside. "I see we have company." Rachel stepped aside, flushed. "Lucas, this is Sarah. She's been letting us stay here for the past couple of weeks." Then she looked at Sarah, exhaling. Yeah, so Lucas is Ethan's father." Sarah's eyebrows soared, but then a flicker of realization sparked. "I had a hunch," she said, shifting the grocery bag and eyeing him shrewdly. "Rich suit, fancy car, that's got to be the ex you told me about, right?" A wry twist appeared at the corner of Rachel's mouth. "Yes, and it turns out a lot has changed since we last talked." Sarah's expression softened. She set the groceries on the small kitchen table and extended her hand to Lucas. "I'm Sarah. This one here." She threw a playful glance at Rachel. "Well, she's like family to me. And so is Ethan. So forgive me if I'm a bit cautious." Lucas took her hand, nodding. "I understand," he said simply. "I appreciate you helping them when they needed it. It means a lot to me." Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, well, I brought some groceries. Rachel, I picked up those cereal bars Ethan likes, and a few more things. You can settle up later." Rachel began emptying the bag, a soft smile of gratitude. "Thanks, Sarah." Meanwhile, Ethan, curious about the new arrival, shuffled over. "Auntie Sarah, look, Lucas helped me clean up my crayons." His eyes shone with pride. "That's wonderful," Sarah said, ruffling his hair. Then she gave him a conspiratorial grin. "I saw some kids playing outside. Maybe if your mom says it's okay, you can join them for a bit." Ethan spun to Rachel, bouncing on his toes. Yes, can I?" Rachel gave him a warm nod, glancing at Lucas. "Sure. Just stay in front where I can see you from the window." With a victorious whoop, Ethan dashed toward the door, stuffing his feet into little sneakers. Soon, the sound of his laughter mixed with the voices of other children outside. The three adults hovered in the doorway, watching him scamper down the block. The quiet inside felt more charged now. Sarah cleared her throat. "So I guess I should leave you two to talk. I need to put these perishables away before they go bad." She grabbed a few items and stowed them in the fridge, deliberately giving Lucas and Rachel space. Rachel led Lucas back to the living room. Through the window they could see Ethan running around with neighborhood kids, a small swirl of dust rising from their sneakers. Lucas smiled instinctively. "He seems happy." "He's always been pretty cheerful," Rachel said, a note of pride in her voice. "He's resilient, too. Even when we had to move around, he always managed to adapt." Lucas nodded, letting his attention linger on Ethan for a moment. Then he turned to Rachel, voice dropping. "I want to do this right, Rachel. However that looks. If it means me visiting regularly or him staying at my place sometimes, I'm open to anything that lets me be part of his life." Rachel pressed her lips together. "For now, let's start small. Spend some time with him here, or maybe we can meet at the park, see how he handles changes in routine." Lucas understood the subtext. She worried about uprooting him too quickly. "That makes sense," he said. "But soon I'd like him to visit my home too. He should know the other half of who he is." A ghost of a smile haunted Rachel's face. "I know," she said softly. "It's just a lot, you know? Adapting to the idea of you being around, thinking about how it might affect him, and me, if I'm honest." He reached out and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I don't want to rush you, but please believe I'm serious about being here." She nodded, something unspoken passing between them, a fragile truce, overshadowed by an unacknowledged longing neither was ready to confront. "Thank you," she said, her tone warm yet cautious. From across the apartment, Sarah called out, "Hey, Rachel, where do you want these?" She trailed off, emerging from the kitchen with a half-unpacked bag of groceries. Her eyes flicked between the two of them, reading the tension. "Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt." Rachel waved a dismissive hand. "No worries," she said. "Actually, would you mind? Maybe Lucas and I could go outside to watch Ethan for a bit?" Her gaze shifted to Lucas. We can talk more out there." Sarah blinked, then nodded. "Sure, go. I'll finish putting things away." The late afternoon sunshine welcomed them as they slipped outside. Brooklyn's streets were lively, with neighbors chatting on stoops and the muffled roar of cars passing at the far intersection. The children's voices rose and fell like bird song. Lucas saw Ethan playing tag, squealing happily as he tried to outrun a slightly older boy. A pang of something like pride mixed with protectiveness washed over him. Rachel led Lucas to a stoop a few doors down, a spot from which they could keep an eye on Ethan. They sat side by side, shoulders nearly touching but not quite. For a moment, neither spoke. The hush felt neither awkward nor entirely comfortable, more like the calm before a necessary conversation. Finally, Lucas cleared his throat. "When I think of everything you must have gone through alone, it breaks me," he admitted, voice hushed. She looked away, scanning the sidewalk. "It wasn't easy," she said. "I had to move when bills piled up, found part-time work in London. Then Ethan got sick a couple of times, but we got through, and now we're here, so maybe it's some kind of second chance." She let out a shaky breath, then turned to meet his gaze. "Lucas, about us." Her voice trailed off, uncertain. He leaned in carefully. "Yeah? What do we tell Ethan? Does he need to know everything about how you and I ended?" She swallowed. "I never filled his head with resentment. I told him his dad was someone special, someone who just wasn't around. I know that might have been naive." Lucas's heart clenched. "Thank you for not making me the villain." He paused, choosing his words. "We'll be honest with him in an age-appropriate way. He doesn't need the details of our argument or the mistakes we both made. He just needs to know that I love him, that we both do." She nodded, eyes glassy with emotion. "All right, that's fair." They watched Ethan chase a friend around a parked car. Rachel placed a hand lightly on Lucas's forearm, as if testing a fragile boundary. "I'm sorry, by the way," she murmured, "for disappearing. Part of me always believed you would have helped if I'd told you sooner, but the rest of me was just so scared. We had that huge blow-up, and then—" Lucas covered her hand with his. "I said a lot of hurtful things, Rachel. I was so wrapped up in proving myself in business that I pushed everyone away. I don't blame you for thinking I wouldn't have wanted a kid." She blinked rapidly, brushing away the start of tears. "That night when we last fought, you accused me of using you for your money. You said you didn't need me, didn't need anyone." Her voice quivered. "I took it to heart, I guess." He closed his eyes, recalling those fierce arguments he'd nearly forgotten. "I was young, angry, and hurt. None of it was truly about you. It was about me dealing, or failing to deal, with my father's scandals. I took it out on you." He exhaled. "I'm sorry." Tension slipped from her shoulders, replaced by a tremulous relief. Maybe it wasn't a full absolution, but it was a start. A giggle burst from Ethan just then as he tripped, tumbling onto a patch of grass. He popped back up with a grin, brushing off his knees. Both parents instinctively rose, but the boy quickly showed he was fine, dashing away again. Rachel and Lucas resumed their seats, but now their shoulders touched more fully, a subtle closeness that reflected a change in the air. "I want to try," Rachel said suddenly, her voice quiet but resolute. "I mean, let's see where this goes. For Ethan's sake, and for us too, maybe. I can't promise anything beyond that, but I'm willing to see how we can be a family of some sort." Lucas swallowed, nodding. "That means more to me than you know." They stayed there together, the sun growing lower in the sky, occasionally calling out a reminder for Ethan to stay within sight, and as dusk gently crept in, the city's glow began to flicker to life in the distance. For the first time in a long while, Lucas felt an unexpected sense of hope. Here on a simple stoop in Brooklyn, with chipped paint and children's laughter echoing in the background, he found something deeper than all the corporate power in the world, a shot at redemption, healing, and a love he'd thought was lost forever. Late evening painted the sky in shades of pale pink and dusky orange as Lucas walked Rachel and Ethan back to Sarah's apartment. The warmth of the day had given way to a mellow breeze, carrying the faint chatter of neighbors returning from work. Cars lined the narrow street, and on the corner, an old lamppost hummed to life. It was a modest tableau, but to Lucas it felt oddly comforting, like stepping into a new chapter of his life that had little to do with the polished high-rise offices he once thought defined him. Ethan let out a burst of laughter, hopping over every crack on the sidewalk. Lucas kept pace, occasionally extending a steadying hand whenever the boy's balance wavered. Meanwhile, Rachel walked on the other side of Ethan, her posture more relaxed than earlier in the day. Yet an undercurrent of worry flickered in her eyes, as if she still braced for something to go wrong at any moment. When they reached the stoop of the apartment, Ethan spun around. "Mommy, can Lucas come in for a little longer? We could watch cartoons." Lucas glanced at Rachel, his gaze full of gentle hope. She hesitated, biting her lip. "It's getting late, baby. You need your bath, and I'm sure Lucas has important things to do." But Ethan's lower lip jutted out in a slight pout, and he clutched his teddy bear more tightly. "Please?" he pleaded. Then to Lucas he said, "Don't you want to watch cartoons with me?" A surprisingly fierce wave of longing coursed through Lucas. For so many years he had filled his time with endless meetings, business dinners, and after-hours work. The idea of simply sitting down to watch a cartoon with his son struck him as both mundane and unbelievably precious. "I'd love to, buddy," he replied softly. Rachel inhaled, glancing between them. "Just for a short while, then," she agreed, relenting with a small smile. "But bath time is non-negotiable." Ethan cheered, bounding up the steps to unlock the door, a skill he insisted on mastering recently, Rachel explained quietly. Moments later, they all piled back into the modest living room. Sarah, who had changed into a pair of comfortable pajamas, offered them a quick wave before heading to her bedroom, murmuring something about letting them have family time. Ethan toddled over to the low TV stand, rummaging through a small stack of DVDs. "This one's my favorite," he announced, brandishing a brightly colored case featuring friendly animated animals. He popped the disc in with a focus so serious it almost made Lucas laugh. Then Ethan scurried onto the couch, patting the cushion beside him in invitation. Lucas cast Rachel a questioning glance. She nodded, so he sank down beside Ethan, who practically glowed with excitement. As the opening credits played, Rachel settled on the couch's other side, ensuring Ethan nestled comfortably between them. The first few minutes of the cartoon passed in a blur of cheerful music and talking creatures, but Lucas hardly noticed. His attention was on Ethan, how the boy giggled at silly jokes, how he clung to his teddy whenever a slightly spooky character appeared, how he occasionally turned to grin at Lucas as if to say, "Isn't this the best?" A gentle calm wrapped around them. Rachel, too, looked unusually serene, the day's tensions momentarily forgotten. For the first time in years, Lucas felt a contentment that had nothing to do with success or prestige. It was a sense of belonging, an anchor in a life that had drifted aimlessly for too long. When the cartoon concluded, Rachel tapped Ethan's shoulder. "All right, time's up. Bath and bedtime, remember?" Ethan pouted, but ultimately nodded, yawning in spite of himself. He slid off the couch, teddy bear in tow, and headed toward the hallway. Lucas watched, feeling a bittersweet twinge. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to read Ethan a bedtime story, ask him about his day, learn every detail of his little world. But he sensed that pushing for too much, too soon, might backfire. Rachel stood, stretching her arms. "I'll get him settled. Do you want to stay until he's tucked in?" She asked it hesitantly, like she wasn't sure whether it was appropriate to offer. He met her gaze, gratitude shining in his eyes. "If you're okay with that, I'd love to say goodnight." She nodded, that tentative smile curving her lips again. "All right, well, he can be a bit fussy, but I guess you'll see." Lucas followed her down the short hallway to the bathroom, trying not to intrude on their routine. Rachel set the taps, filling the tub with water at just the right temperature. Ethan dropped in a couple of toy boats, humming contentedly. "Do you like baths, Lucas?" he asked at one point, peering up with wide eyes. Lucas chuckled softly. "They're okay," he teased. "Probably not as fun as yours, though." Ethan beamed, then launched into a monologue about how his toy boats were on a secret mission, one that apparently required them to sail across a land of soap bubbles. Rachel gave Lucas a look that said, "See what I live with every night?" But her expression was warm, clearly adoring this little boy's wild imagination. After the bath, Ethan emerged in dinosaur pajamas. He happily scuttled over to his tiny bedroom, which was crammed with crates of toys and a small bed covered in spaceship sheets. Rachel grabbed a storybook from a makeshift shelf. "Which one tonight?" she asked, though she seemed to already know the answer. "That one," Ethan declared, pointing to a well-worn picture book about a dragon's quest. "Mommy reads it in a scary voice sometimes." Rachel handed the book to Lucas. "Would you like to do the honors?" she asked, surprising him. A surge of nervousness mingled with excitement. He hesitated, unsure if he'd do it right. But Ethan scrambled onto the bed, patting the spot next to him. "Please read it. You can do the voices, too." Lucas swallowed, settling next to Ethan, and opened the book. Rachel perched on the edge of the bed, leaning close enough so Ethan could rest against her if he chose. Carefully, Lucas began, his voice hushed in the small room. At first he felt self-conscious, stumbling over the dramatic phrases. But soon enough, Ethan's enthralled expressions spurred him on. He attempted a gruff dragon voice and a squeaky voice for the rabbit character. By the time he reached the final page, Ethan was giggling non-stop. When the story ended, Ethan yawned and snuggled closer to his mother. Lucas tenderly closed the book, placing it on a small nightstand. Ethan's eyelids fluttered. The day's excitement was finally catching up with him. He turned to Lucas with a drowsy smile. "Can you come tomorrow too?" he asked, voice thick with sleep. Lucas's heart twisted. He brushed a hand gently over Ethan's hair. "I'll try my best," he promised. "Get some rest now, okay?" With that, Ethan closed his eyes, breathing slow and deep. Rachel quietly rose, and Lucas followed suit, tiptoeing out of the room. She eased the door almost shut, leaving just a sliver of hallway light. For a moment, they stood in silence, listening to the little boy's rhythmic breathing on the other side. In the living room, Sarah gave them a knowing smile from where she was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "He's out?" she asked, already guessing the answer. Rachel nodded. "I'll just grab some water," she murmured, ducking into the kitchen. Lucas lingered by the couch, feeling a strange mix of peace and longing. He could walk out the door and head back to his plush hotel suite, but he felt like he was leaving behind the closest thing to home he'd felt in a long time. Sarah eyed him over the top of her phone. "So," she said softly, "you're stepping up. Better late than never, right?" Lucas met her gaze, reading the challenge in her eyes. "I realize I have a lot to make up for," he replied, "but I'm here for the long haul." She nodded once, acknowledging the sincerity in his tone. "All right," she said simply, "then prove it. You're already on the right track." Just then, Rachel emerged, handing Lucas a glass of water. He accepted it gratefully. Outside, the hush of night fell over the block, streetlights casting pools of amber on the pavement. An occasional car passed, headlights sweeping the living room window. Inside, though, everything felt calm, as if encapsulated in a bubble of quiet intimacy. Lucas took a sip, clearing his throat. "I should probably go soon," he said. "Ethan's asleep, and it's been a long day for everyone, but can we make plans to meet again tomorrow? Maybe I can take you two out somewhere. A kid-friendly place, obviously." Rachel looked uncertain. I have to see about applying to a few jobs, and I promised Ethan we'd check out a daycare nearby. It's complicated. An idea struck Lucas. I could come with you, help you look at daycare options, run errands. I don't mean to intrude, but I want to be there for everyday stuff, not just the fun moments. Her eyes softened. You sure you don't have meetings to run or an empire to manage? He quirked a sad smile. It'll keep, he said, recalling how easily he'd rescheduled everything that morning. Family first, right? Rachel let out a soft exhale, nodding. All right, we'll figure out a plan. Text me in the morning, okay? They walked together to the front door, passing by the small signs of daily life. Sneakers jumbled in a corner, mail stacked on a tiny table, a child's backpack printed with cartoon characters. All of it was a stark contrast to the pristine minimalism of Lucas's usual environment. Yet he found it comforting, a tangible expression of the warmth and chaos that came with real family life. Standing in the hallway, he turned to Rachel. They stood a bit too close, and for a moment, neither stepped back. He caught the light floral scent of her shampoo, a detail that hit him with an unexpected pang of nostalgia. Thank you, he said quietly, voice low to avoid waking Ethan, for letting me in today. She nodded, arms loosely folded. It was good, she admitted. Better than I expected. The flicker of unspoken history lingered between them. Love that once burned bright, then crumbled into regret. Now the embers glowed anew, caution warring with hope. Lucas brushed a tentative hand against Rachel's arm, a gesture that asked permission. She didn't pull away, though her eyes dipped momentarily before meeting his. The moment held, heartbeats resonating in the hush. Eventually, she eased back, hand lingering near the doorknob. We'll talk tomorrow, she whispered. He nodded, stepping out onto the stoop. As she gently closed the door, he thought he glimpsed the trace of a wistful smile on her lips. Outside, the evening air felt cool against his skin. Pulling his jacket closer, he glanced back at the door before heading down the steps. Walking along the sidewalk, he felt a surge of determination. This was just the beginning. The road to reconciling with Rachel and building a relationship with Ethan wouldn't be smooth. But if today had proven anything, it was that second chances could be found in the simplest moments of shared laughter, bedtime stories, and open hearts. Open. And so, with the hush of nighttime Brooklyn surrounding him, Lucas Anderson felt something new settle deep in his chest. Optimism, bright and fragile like the first hint of dawn on the horizon. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of Lucas's hotel suite, chasing away the last traces of sleep. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at the clock. 6:15 a.m. Despite the early hour, he felt wide awake, mind already churning with anticipation. Today, he would spend more time with Rachel and Ethan, helping them run errands, visit a daycare, maybe even grab lunch together. It was the most mundane agenda he'd had in years, and yet it thrilled him more than any high-stakes meeting ever could. Rising from bed, he made quick work of his usual routine: shower, shave, and a simple breakfast from room service. The difference today was his choice of clothes. Gone were the tailored suits and silk ties. Instead, he pulled on comfortable jeans and a casual button-down shirt. Something about seeing Ethan made him want to appear more approachable, less corporate. He checked his reflection in the mirror, noticing how the man staring back still had an edge of nervous energy in his eyes. He inhaled, reminding himself it would be okay. This was about family now. His phone buzzed with messages, mostly business inquiries and updates on ongoing deals. Marjorie, his assistant, had left a concise voicemail. Just confirming you're still out of the office. Don't worry, everything is under control here. A small smile tugged at Lucas's lips. The Empire would survive one more day without him. Once he was dressed and ready, he tapped out a quick text to Rachel. Good morning. I'm free anytime. Let me know when you'd like me to swing by. He tried not to stare at the phone while waiting for her reply, but it felt impossible to resist glancing at the screen every few seconds. Eventually, it pinged with her response. Morning. Ethan's still sleeping. I need to check the job listings online. Maybe come by around 9? Lucas exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Perfect. Enough time to finalize a few more remote tasks. He fired off a couple of quick emails to his CFO, confirming some figures for a London branch project, then promptly wrapped up business. He refused to let anything overshadow the day ahead. By 8:45, he was already in the back seat of his sedan, instructing his driver to head to Rachel's address in Brooklyn. As they navigated the busy streets, passing rows of brownstones and small shops, Lucas felt a warmth spread in his chest. Yesterday had been a tentative first step. Today, he hoped to deepen this fragile connection. When he arrived, he told the driver to park a block away. He wanted to walk the final stretch, breathe in the local atmosphere. People bustled about, parents guiding kids to school, a man sipping coffee on his stoop. The sense of routine, of everyday life, felt oddly peaceful to Lucas. It reminded him there was a world outside boardrooms and corporate towers. He rang the buzzer for apartment 3B at precisely 9 A moment later, the door clicked open. Inside, Sarah was the one waiting in the hallway, wearing an oversized sweater and holding a mug of tea. She raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk on her face. "Punctual, aren't we?" Lucas offered a polite nod. "Old habits," he said lightly. "Rachel's in the living room, sifting through job listings," Sarah explained, stepping aside. Then, with a tilt of her head, she added, "Ethan just woke up, so brace yourself. He's extra energetic after a good sleep." Lucas felt a ripple of anticipation. "Thanks for the warning." He entered to find Rachel seated on the couch, a laptop balanced on her knees. Ethan was on the floor, bright-eyed, flipping through a picture book while nibbling on cereal. The moment he spotted Lucas, Ethan sprang up. "You came!" he chirped, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Lucas crouched down, offering a quick grin. "Didn't I say I would?" Rachel closed her laptop, placing it aside. "Good morning," she said, wearing a faintly tired smile. "Ethan was just telling me about his dream. Something with flying dinosaurs?" Ethan bobbed his head excitedly. "They were bigger than the planes, and I was riding one like a superhero." Lucas chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. "That sounds awesome." Then he turned to Rachel, noticing the lines of stress around her eyes. "Any luck on the job hunt?" She shrugged. "A few leads, nothing solid. I was a receptionist in London for a while, but that ended when we moved. I'm open to anything stable now, especially if it comes with health benefits for Ethan." Lucas tucked his hands into his pockets. "I know a few people in various industries. If you're interested, I could see what's available." "No pressure," he added hastily, noting the spark of hesitation in her gaze. She offered a cautious nod. "Maybe. Let me first see what's out there on my own." He understood the pride in her voice, the desire to handle things independently. Still, he couldn't shake the urge to help lighten her load. "All right, just keep me posted." Ethan tugged at his sleeve. "We're going to visit a daycare later, right? It's supposed to have a big playground with a slide and swings." Lucas looked at Rachel, who nodded. "Yes, we have an appointment to meet the director around noon." "Great." Lucas brightened. "May I come along? Maybe I can talk to them, ask about schedules, tuition, that kind of thing." Rachel seemed relieved rather than put off. "I'd like that," she admitted. "The tuition might be a bit steep, but I need to see the place first. And, well, we'll figure something out." Her voice dipped on the last words, a reminder that finances remained a concern. Lucas didn't press the issue. Instead, he glanced at Ethan's half-eaten cereal. "Finish your breakfast, buddy," he teased, poking the cereal box. While Ethan returned to munching, Rachel gathered her purse and looked at Lucas. "I thought we'd head to the daycare around 11:30, maybe stop for a quick lunch after. Until then, maybe we can talk about how you want to be involved day to day, schedules, that sort of thing." He nodded. "Whatever works." I'm all yours today." They settled in the kitchen, Rachel on one side of the small table, Lucas on the other, Ethan wandering around the living room in earshot, humming to himself. Rachel cleared her throat. "So, short term, I have a lot of errands. Doctor visits for Ethan, job applications, figuring out a more permanent place to live. If you really want to help, I could use someone to watch him while I go to interviews. It'd save me from hiring a babysitter I can't afford right now." Lucas's face lit up. "Absolutely, I'd love to spend more time with him." Rachel exhaled as though relieved. "Great. Then long-term, we need to figure out how we handle birthdays, holidays, and I should warn you, if you plan on introducing Ethan to your business associates or family, the press might get involved. I don't want him hurt or hounded by paparazzi." He winced. "You're right. That's a concern. My name tends to attract media attention. We'll be careful. Until we're both comfortable, we'll keep his existence low-key if that's what you want." She nodded appreciatively. "For now, yes. Later, we can talk about going public, but let's not jump there yet." A silence fell, not entirely awkward, just heavy with the weight of making decisions that would shape their futures. Then Ethan bounded back, curious. "What you talking about?" Lucas grinned, glancing at Rachel. "Grown-up stuff. But we're about done. Ready to get going soon?" Ethan nodded, enthusiastic. "Can we get ice cream after the daycare? They have a shop on the corner with sprinkles." Lucas laughed, glancing at Rachel for confirmation. She rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. "We'll see, Mr. Sweet Tooth." Shortly after, they grabbed their bags and headed out. Sarah was already at work, so the three of them set off on foot toward a nearby subway stop. Lucas found himself in a new role, carrying Ethan's small backpack while making sure the boy stayed safely between them on the sidewalk. The child chattered away about everything from birds perched on telephone wires to the shapes of passing clouds. At the subway station, they descended the steps into the echoing corridors. Lucas fished out his wallet to cover fares, ignoring Rachel's half-hearted protests. The train arrived in a gust of wind, and they boarded, squishing into seats beside each other. Ethan pressed his nose to the window, enthralled by the dark tunnel whipping past. Rachel subtly pressed closer to Lucas, partly for balance, partly perhaps for comfort in a crowded, jostling car. It was a short ride, but in that time, Lucas soaked in the ordinary magic of it all. The conductor's announcements crackling overhead, the mix of tired commuters and lively teens heading to school, the faint screech of metal on tracks. This was Rachel and Ethan's world, unembellished, authentic, and for once, Lucas felt genuinely at ease being part of it. They reached their stop and emerged into a neighborhood that seemed quieter, more residential, with tree-lined sidewalks and a few modest businesses dotting the block. The daycare building stood near the end of the street, a cheerful place with bright murals painted on the exterior walls. Ethan's excitement practically vibrated off him as they approached. Inside, a friendly receptionist welcomed them. "You must be here for the noon appointment," she said, checking a list. "Ms. Miller and Mr. Anderson?" Rachel swallowed, nodding. Lucas noticed the slight tension in her shoulders, guessing she was bracing for questions about finances or their family situation. He placed a reassuring hand at the small of her back before she moved to sign in on a clipboard. Moments later, the daycare director, Ms. Powell, emerged, a petite woman with a warm smile and a quick stride. She led them on a short tour, classrooms filled with colorful artwork, a nap area lined with little cots, a fenced-in playground out back where a handful of kids were already at play. Ethan's eyes widened, darting eagerly to the slides and monkey bars. Lucas watched Rachel absorb every detail with a critical eye, safety features, staff-to-child ratio, the cleanliness of each room. Meanwhile, he peppered Ms. Powell with questions about daily routines, meal plans, and extracurricular activities. If he was going to be part of Ethan's life, he wanted to know it all. Finally, Ms. Powell took them to her office to discuss enrollment details. Ethan, sensing grown-up talk was about to start, asked if he could peek at the playground again. Rachel nodded, reminding him to stay within sight of the window. He scampered off, leaving the three adults to talk. Ms. Powell set a pamphlet and some forms on her desk. "We'd love to have Ethan here. He seems bright and sociable. The monthly tuition is listed here along with optional add-ons like extended care or weekend activities." Rachel glanced at the figures, her face tightening. Lucas saw the subtle flash of worry in her eyes. Instinctively, he reached for the papers. "These costs? Do you have financial assistance programs?" he asked gently, hoping to ease the burden. Ms. Powell offered a sympathetic smile. "We have a small scholarship fund, though it's limited. If you meet certain income criteria, you can apply. Alternatively, many parents find a sponsor or split costs with family." Lucas met Rachel's gaze. He could see the internal struggle. She didn't want charity, but she also didn't want to deprive Ethan of a good daycare. Without waiting for permission, he spoke up. "We'll figure it out," he said calmly, "but I can cover what's needed. Please consider us for any relevant program, but rest assured that Ethan will attend if we decide this is the right place for him." Rachel's lips parted, protest in her eyes. He reached over, placing a hand over hers on the armrest of the chair. "Let me help," he murmured, voice quiet enough that Ms. Powell politely looked away to give them a moment. Rachel exhaled slowly, then nodded once, jaw tight. They didn't have to finalize anything today, but the unspoken understanding was clear. Lucas was prepared to stand by his son. Despite the swirl of conflicting pride and relief, Rachel offered a reluctant smile. "All right," she conceded. "We'll talk about it." They finished up with Ms. Powell, thanking her for her time, and found Ethan out by the playground, enthralled by a bright red slide. Lucas watched as the boy climbed to the top and slid down, giggling. His heart clenched with affection. This was what fatherhood felt like, an all-consuming desire to give a child everything that might bring him joy. At last, they said their goodbyes and stepped back into the sunshine. Ethan immediately began bubbling over with excitement about the jungle gym, the friendly kids he'd met, and the colors on the classroom walls. Rachel listened with a fond smile, still holding on to the pamphlets. Meanwhile, Lucas hovered protectively, offering enthusiastic nods. "Next on the agenda," Rachel sighed, glancing at her phone, "we could catch a late lunch. Then I need to swing by a job fair at the community center around 2, if that's okay. You still want to stick around?" Lucas smiled, because truly he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. "Absolutely," he said, gently taking Ethan's hand as they strolled down the block together. "Let's go find some ice cream with sprinkles first. I believe we have a promise to fulfill." And as Ethan cheered, and Rachel shot Lucas a grateful, if slightly shy, grin, he knew that step by step, errand by errand, they were building a fragile new life, together. By the time the three of them exited the daycare building, the midday sun was high overhead, casting shadows along the sidewalk. Ethan bounded ahead, rattling off a mile-a-minute description of the colorful classroom and the friends he hoped to make. Rachel followed at a more subdued pace, still holding the stack of daycare pamphlets. She looked pensive, relieved that Lucas was willing to help, yet clearly uncertain about allowing him to absorb so much of her and Ethan's financial burdens. Lucas stayed a half-step behind, listening to Ethan's excited chatter. Each time the boy mentioned a new detail, like the really tall slide or the funny songs they sang in circle time, Lucas felt a fierce tenderness bloom in his chest. This was fatherhood in action, he realized, caring about every small discovery and victory in a child's day. He couldn't remember the last time a business deal had left him feeling quite so exhilarated or alive. "Okay," Rachel announced as they reached the street corner. "I think we promised a certain someone ice cream with sprinkles." Her tone was light, though a hint of worry lingered in her eyes. At times she seemed unable to fully accept that Lucas truly wanted to be here, sharing these moments. Ethan's face lit up. "Yes, yes, yes," he cheered, hopping in place. They turned down a side street where a small, family-run ice cream shop beckoned with a bright striped awning. Its big window showed kids perched at tables, slurping milkshakes and devouring cones. As they approached, Lucas pulled open the door and a burst of sweet, cool air washed over them. Inside, the walls were painted with whimsical murals, dancing sprinkles, grinning ice cream cones, candy-colored clouds. The glass case displayed rows of flavors, from classic vanilla to bubblegum pink strawberry. Ethan pressed his nose to the display, eyes wider than ever, trying to decide. "So many choices," he breathed. Then he glanced at Rachel. "Mommy, can I get 2 scoops, please?" Rachel glanced at Lucas. "Well, sure, if you eat it all," she said, her voice trailing into a chuckle. "Just don't blame us for a sugar rush later." Ethan beamed. "I want cookies and cream on top and strawberry on the bottom, extra sprinkles." Lucas couldn't help but grin at the boy's enthusiasm. Turning to the teenage clerk behind the counter, he placed Ethan's order, then asked Rachel what she'd like. She hesitated. "Just a small vanilla," she said. "1 scoop." "And for you, sir?" the clerk asked. Lucas thought about it. "You know what? Make it chocolate with sprinkles," he said decisively. If he was sharing an ice cream day with Ethan, he might as well do it wholeheartedly. They found a small round table and settled in. Ethan perched on the edge of his seat, ice cream already dripping down the cone, Lucas and Rachel watching him with a mix of amusement and exasperation. Rachel dabbed Ethan's chin with a napkin, fussing gently about the sticky mess. Meanwhile, Lucas took a careful lick of his chocolate scoop, remembering he hadn't done something like this, sitting in a casual ice cream parlor in broad daylight, since he was a teenager. "It's good," he admitted, savoring the taste. "I might have been missing out all these years." Rachel arched an eyebrow, smiling around a spoonful of vanilla. "You don't exactly strike me as the type who makes time for random treats. You used to be so rigid, always on the go, always with a plan." Lucas shrugged, a hint of sheepishness coloring his face. "I was. Maybe I still am, to a degree, but I'm trying to change that." Ethan crunched through a mouthful of sprinkles. "Are you going to come with us to the job fair, Lucas?" he asked, voice muffled. "Mommy said we have to go after lunch." Lucas nodded. "Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it." Rachel gave him a sidelong glance. "You know it's not glamorous, right? A local community center, a bunch of booths. It might be crowded and not exactly comfortable." Lucas offered a soft chuckle. "I've been in enough cramped board meetings to handle a little crowd, and honestly, if I can help, I'm in." For a moment, something unspoken shimmered in her eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or relief that she wouldn't be alone. She refocused on Ethan, wiping stray ice cream dribbles off his hand. When they finished, the 3 of them stepped outside, Ethan bouncing off leftover energy from the sugary treat. Rachel led them down the block, eventually reaching a modest, brick-fronted community center. A bright sign proclaimed "Job Fair Today" in bold letters. The courtyard buzzed with activity, people clutching resumes, wearing hopeful or determined expressions. Posters touted positions in retail, administrative work, local factories, childcare, and more. Ethan balked a little at the crowd, sliding closer to Rachel. "It's busy," he whispered, half burrowing behind her legs. She ruffled his hair, leaning down. "It's okay, sweetie. We just need to talk to a few people, maybe pick up some applications." Lucas scanned the scene. Booths lined the main hall, each manned by recruiters or HR representatives. Some attendees browsed alone, while others formed small lines waiting to speak with company reps. The hum of conversation was constant, echoing off the high ceiling. As they entered, Rachel paused. "I need a minute to figure out where to start," she murmured, scanning the large posters overhead. "I was thinking office administration or receptionist roles. Maybe something in healthcare if training isn't too strict." Lucas nodded, wanting to help, but careful not to overstep. "What about your background as a receptionist in London?" he asked gently. "Might be worth focusing on that skill set." She swallowed. "Yeah, I might. The pay can be decent if it's a bigger firm." Ethan tugged at Lucas's sleeve. "Is there somewhere I can play?" The community center had a small corner with chairs and a kids' reading area, presumably for parents who had to bring their children along. "You can hang out there," Rachel suggested, pointing it out, "but stay where I can see you." She led Ethan to a corner seat with some picture books, then looked back at Lucas. "Would you mind keeping an eye on him for a few minutes while I talk to some recruiters?" He met her gaze, nodding. "Of course. Take your time." Rachel inhaled, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll just be around these first few booths." As Rachel ventured into the throng, Lucas guided Ethan to the small play area. The boy plopped down, flipping through a worn-out alphabet book. Occasionally, he asked Lucas to read a page or two. Lucas obliged, weaving silly voices into each line. Parents nearby watched with mild curiosity. Some recognized Lucas's face from media coverage, but no one approached him. It was a bubble of relative anonymity in a place that was all about everyday concerns, rather than high-stakes business drama. Minutes turned into half an hour. Lucas kept glancing around to track Rachel's progress. She moved from booth to booth, collecting brochures and forms, occasionally chatting with recruiters. Each time their eyes met across the room, she offered him a slight smile as if thankful for his steady presence by Ethan. Eventually, a mild commotion near one of the booths caught Lucas's attention. He saw Rachel in conversation with a recruiter who appeared agitated, speaking loudly enough that several people nearby turned to watch. Lucas's body went taut, protective instincts flaring. He patted Ethan's shoulder. "Stay here, buddy," he murmured. Then he made his way across the hall, weaving through the crowd. By the time he arrived, Rachel looked flushed and upset. The recruiter, a lanky, middle-aged man with a name tag that read Connor, pointed at some paperwork she held. "I'm sorry," Connor was saying, his tone clipped. "We can't just hire anyone, especially if they lack recent references. It's a demanding environment." Rachel clenched her jaw. "I understand it's competitive. I just asked if there was any possibility." Connor let out a dismissive laugh. "We need staff who are up to speed. People who can prove themselves, not liabilities." His gaze flicked to Rachel's pamphlets, as though mocking them. "We aren't here to train novices." Lucas stepped in, brow furrowing. "Excuse me," he said, voice firm. "Is there a problem?" The recruiter eyed him warily. "This young lady is insisting we overlook standard requirements." Rachel let out a shaky breath, cheeks reddening. "I'm not insisting on anything. I only asked about part-time or entry-level positions. I can learn if you're willing to train, that's all." Connor waved a dismissive hand. "My company can't invest in every unqualified applicant who strolls in. Maybe you should consider less specialized fields." A spark of anger lit Lucas's eyes. He drew himself up to his full height, an air of calm authority washing over him. "I believe you're underestimating her skills," he said evenly. "She's resourceful, well-spoken, and has experience as a receptionist. If training is the barrier, you're short-sighted not to consider someone who's motivated to succeed." Connor's expression twisted with disdain. "And who might you be?" Rachel flashed Lucas a pleading look as if to say, "This isn't worth a scene." But Lucas wouldn't stand idly by. "Just a concerned party," he replied tersely. "But I also happen to know a great deal about business operations. Let me assure you, hiring someone with the right attitude and potential can be far more valuable than hiring a complacent candidate with a perfect resume." A small circle of curious onlookers gathered. Connor bristled under the spotlight. Then, perhaps realizing he was losing public favor, he forced a tight smile. "I appreciate your passion, sir, but our company has its processes." He turned to Rachel. "Feel free to leave your information. We'll reach out if something opens." With that, he shoved a business card in her direction. The conversation concluded on a frigid note, Connor stepping away to greet the next visitor. Rachel's shoulders sagged, embarrassment etched across her features. "Lucas, you didn't have to—" He gently touched her arm. He was rude. "You deserve respect," he said, voice quietly fierce. "I'm sorry if I made it awkward." She shook her head, blinking back frustration. "No, I appreciate you trying to defend me. It's just that I don't want to depend on you to fight all my battles. I need to learn to stand on my own feet again." He nodded, understanding. "I know, I'll back off if you want, but if anyone disrespects you, I can't promise to just stay silent." A flicker of conflicting emotions glimmered in her eyes: gratitude, self-consciousness, and perhaps a lingering sense of her own vulnerability. "All right," she said quietly. "Just let's not make a scene every time someone shuts a door on me. That's been happening a lot lately, and I can handle it." He swallowed, remembering all the times he'd had doors swung wide open for him thanks to his name and wealth. The reality that Rachel faced rejection regularly felt like a punch to the gut. "Okay," he murmured. "I understand." They walked away from the booth, the tension easing a bit. Ethan, spotting them from the play area, jumped up, curiosity shining on his face. Lucas forced a reassuring smile to tell the boy everything was fine. They gathered Ethan and decided to leave the fair, Rachel's mood subdued. She had picked up a few promising leads despite the incident, but the sting lingered. "Maybe I'll hear back from one of these places," she said, half-heartedly trying to sound optimistic. Lucas laid a gentle hand on her shoulder, giving it a comforting squeeze. "If not, we'll find something else," he said, voice low so Ethan wouldn't catch the seriousness. "You're talented, Rachel. Don't let one jerk discourage you." She managed a wry smile in response, then turned her attention to Ethan, who was babbling about how that big man was mean to Mommy. She hushed him gently, ushering him along as they headed outside. The sun had lowered slightly, mid-afternoon drifting into late. Cars honked in the distance, and a breeze rustled the leaf-laden sidewalks. "Where to next?" Lucas asked, trying to lighten the mood. Rachel took a breath. "How about we walk Ethan through the park for a bit? Let him run off some energy. Then we can head home." He glanced at Ethan, whose eyes lit up at the word park. Lucas nodded, relief flooding him that she was still open to spending time together. "Sounds perfect," he said. "Lead the way." So they set off down a tree-lined avenue, heading toward a small neighborhood park. As they walked, Ethan prattled on about the swings and how high he could fly on them. Rachel seemed to steady herself with each step, shoulders loosening from the tension of the job fair fiasco. Lucas stayed close, occasionally brushing his arm against hers, a silent offer of support. Reaching the park, Ethan dashed toward a jungle gym, squealing with delight. Lucas and Rachel found an unoccupied bench from which they could watch him safely. A comfortable lull fell between them, a moment of shared reflection perhaps. The rustle of leaves and children's laughter formed a soothing backdrop. Lucas turned to Rachel. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. She blinked. "Proud of me? For what?" "For not giving up," he replied. "I see how hard you're trying, how you keep looking for solutions even when it's tough. You've been strong for Ethan." Her gaze flicked away, a flush creeping across her cheeks. "I don't always feel strong," she admitted. "Some days I'm barely holding it together." His hand inched toward hers on the bench. "That's what real strength is," he murmured. "Doing what needs to be done even when it's hard." Rachel let the words settle, then slowly turned her palm to meet his. Their fingers threaded in a gentle, tentative clasp. It was neither grandiose nor a promise that everything was fixed, but it was a quiet acknowledgement of unity, a recognition that they could, perhaps, face life's hurdles together. Then Ethan's shout from the top of the slide pulled their attention. They looked up, just in time to see him wave, calling out, "Look, Mommy! Lucas, I'm king of the castle!" Rachel laughed, the sound softer than usual but genuine. She released Lucas's hand and stood, stepping forward to stand near the slide in case Ethan needed a hand climbing down. Lucas watched them, his heart full. For the first time in years, he felt part of something profoundly human, a web of small challenges and shared victories. And as the sun continued its trek toward the horizon, painting the park in mellow gold, he realized that in these quiet, unplanned moments lay the greatest treasures life could offer: belonging, purpose, and love. They left the park in the mellow glow of late afternoon, a comforting warmth lingering in the summer air. Ethan, cheeks flushed from climbing and running around, clutched Rachel's hand with one of his own and held Lucas's with the other, happily skipping between them. Parents and children still populated the park, but the hush of dinner time was drawing near, the sky slowly shifting to gentle hues of orange and pink. It was a short walk back to Sarah's apartment, the streets bathed in that golden hour light that made everything seem soft around the edges. As they approached the building, Ethan let out an exaggerated sigh. "I'm hungry," he announced, leaning dramatically against Lucas's hip. "I ran so much my tummy's making noises." Rachel laughed, ruffling Ethan's tousled hair. "I'm sure it is, Drama King. We can fix something quick at home." Lucas eyed the door to the building, recalling the previous day's dinner routine, a simple affair of leftover pasta and fruit. He had a sudden urge to lighten Rachel's load. "What if I pick something up?" he offered. "I can run to that little cafe around the corner, or maybe the grocery, grab some ingredients, cook a meal." Rachel blinked in surprise, her hand still loosely entwined with Ethan's. "You cook?" A hint of self-conscious amusement flashed across Lucas's face. "I can manage a few basic dishes," he admitted. "Not a gourmet chef, but I won't burn the place down." "Probably." Ethan lit up at once. Yes. Lucas is gonna cook for us?" Rachel hesitated, scanning Lucas's expression. She saw only sincerity, no pity or condescension. She let out a breath, nodding. "All right," she said softly. "We could use a real meal, but I insist on helping so you don't have to do everything." Lucas grinned. "Deal." It didn't take long to devise a plan. Rachel handed Ethan the keys to get him started upstairs with instructions to wash his hands and settle in. Then she guided Lucas to a nearby market 3 blocks away, a modest place with fresh produce and a decent selection of meats. Together, they wandered the narrow aisles, sidestepping other shoppers. Rachel pushed a small cart, scanning price tags. She glanced at Lucas's watchful eyes. "I'm used to budgeting tightly," she explained, pulling a pack of chicken breasts from the cooler. "But if we split the cost—" He gently stopped her, placing a second pack of chicken into the cart. "We'll figure it out," he said, voice warm yet firm. "Tonight's on me. Let me do this for you, both of you." A flicker of discomfort crossed her face, but she didn't protest again. Instead, she grabbed a box of pasta, some sauce ingredients, and vegetables. Lucas picked up a small carton of fresh berries for dessert. It was a simple scene, 2 adults shopping for groceries, but the quiet intimacy of it made Rachel's chest tighten. She couldn't recall the last time she'd grocery shopped with someone else sharing the load. In the checkout line, she absent-mindedly reached for her wallet, only for Lucas to gently place a hand on hers, offering a faint shake of his head. She let her wallet slip back into her purse, feeling oddly grateful and slightly guilty. She had grown so accustomed to doing it all herself. Allowing Lucas to pay felt like relinquishing a carefully guarded independence. Yet, beneath that discomfort was relief. Relief she didn't have to carry this burden alone, at least for tonight. When they arrived back at the apartment, the living room was empty, but the faint sound of Ethan's animated chatter drifted from his bedroom. Sarah was nowhere to be seen. Likely she was still at work or out with friends. That left the place quiet, almost cozy, the late-day light spilling through the windows. Rachel set the grocery bags on the tiny kitchen counter and waved Lucas over. "Welcome to my luxurious cooking space," she teased. gesturing at the cramped counters and single-basin sink. Lucas rolled up his sleeves, giving her a playful grin. "I've worked in smaller spaces, believe me," he said, recalling a tiny dorm room he'd once lived in before success found him. He took out the chicken while Rachel retrieved a well-worn cutting board and a small set of knives. They moved around each other in an easy dance, shoulders brushing, the air punctuated by the rhythmic click of knives on the cutting board. Ethan eventually wandered in, drawn by the commotion. "Can I help?" he asked, bouncing on his toes. Rachel handed him a plastic bowl with a few rinsed vegetables to tear into small pieces. It was busy work, but Ethan attacked it with serious concentration, occasionally peeking up at Lucas to see if he was doing it right. Lucas prepared a simple marinade for the chicken, combining oil, salt, pepper, and a pinch of herbs. Rachel boiled water for the pasta and chopped tomatoes for a fresh sauce. The kitchen filled with the aroma of sautéing onions and garlic, a comforting scent that reminded Lucas of simpler times. He tried to recall the last time he'd cooked a homemade meal with someone and realized he couldn't. Not in years, certainly not since Rachel left. Between stirring and seasoning, Rachel found herself glancing sideways at Lucas. She watched how he focused on each step, how he guided Ethan with gentle encouragement, how he kept glancing over to ensure Rachel wasn't overwhelmed. It made her chest ache with a blend of wistfulness and hope. If only they'd had this dynamic years ago. Finally, dinner was ready. They set the small table in the living room because the kitchen was too cramped to accommodate 3 plates comfortably. Lucas helped Ethan hop onto his chair, then pulled out a seat for Rachel like a gentleman from another era. She sat down with a soft laugh. "You really are full of surprises," he shrugged, a bit shy. "Trying to make up for lost time, I guess." Ethan cheered at the sight of the pasta and chicken, diving in with youthful gusto. Rachel twirled spaghetti around her fork, taking a bite. She paused, eyebrows lifting in pleasant surprise. "This is really good," she admitted. Lucas exhaled a breath he'd been holding, relieved. "I'm glad. It's a simple recipe, but sometimes simple is best." They ate in companionable silence for a while, the scraping of forks and quiet contentment filling the space. Ethan, after satisfying his initial hunger, began recounting stories from the park, describing how he flew down the slide like a superhero. Rachel listened, occasionally prompting him for more details while Lucas laughed at each imaginative twist. Eventually, Ethan's energy flagged. He pushed his plate away. "I'm full," he declared, voice heavy with sleepiness. The busy day, daycare tour, park time, the job fair was clearly catching up to him. He rubbed his eyes, blinking slowly. Rachel nudged him gently. "All right, let's get you into your pajamas soon." Ethan nodded but lingered, glancing up at Lucas. "Are you staying for bedtime again?" he asked hopefully, drowsiness thickening his voice. Lucas hesitated, seeking Rachel's face for guidance. She pursed her lips, appearing thoughtful. "Would you like that, Ethan?" she asked softly. "Lucas might have things to do, you know." "I can stay if it's okay," Lucas offered, tone quiet. "I'd like to say goodnight." Ethan let out a small whoop, though it was tempered by a yawn. Rachel smiled, nodding. "Sure, he's not going to last much longer anyway." They cleared the table quickly. Lucas insisted on washing the dishes while Rachel guided Ethan to his room to change. He moved methodically, rinsing plates and cutlery, then setting them to dry, enjoying the domestic satisfaction of a task completed. When the kitchen was clean enough, he dried his hands and followed the hush of voices down the hallway. In Ethan's tiny bedroom, he found the boy blinking against the overhead light, wearing dinosaur pajamas again. Rachel was tucking him under the covers, his teddy bear already nestled at his side. Lucas lingered in the doorway, uncertain if he should intrude. But Ethan spotted him instantly and beckoned him closer. "Story?" the boy asked, blinking hopefully. Rachel offered the well-worn book from the night before. "You want the dragon story again?" Ethan nodded, so Lucas took the book. This time it felt less nerve-wracking. The routine was becoming familiar. He began reading, weaving silly accents for each character. An overexcitable wizard, a grumpy knight, a mischievous dragon. Ethan giggled at the voices, hugging his teddy close. Halfway through, the child's eyelids grew heavy, his giggles turning into soft murmurs. By the final page, he was nodding off, breath evening out. Lucas closed the book gently, watching Ethan sink into slumber. Quietly, he stood and slipped away, Rachel following. In the hallway, they left Ethan's door slightly ajar. Rachel leaned against the wall, arms folded. "He adores you," she whispered. "It's happening so fast. I'm a little stunned." Lucas's voice was equally soft. "He's amazing, smart and funny, and everything I never realized I needed." She nodded, her eyes glimmering in the half-light. "Lucas, She paused, chewing her bottom lip. "I'm afraid," she admitted finally. "Afraid we'll get comfortable with this and something will break it. Whether it's your business life or my own insecurities or just the past creeping in." He swallowed, acknowledging that fear pulsing in the quiet space between them. "I'm afraid too," he confessed. "But I want to face those fears together if you'll let me." Her gaze dropped to the floor, then rose again. "I keep thinking about how we used to fight, the things you said, the things I said. It's not easy to forget." He lifted a gentle hand to her shoulder. "We can't erase it, but maybe we can heal, step by step as a family." She exhaled, nodding slowly. "I want that. For Ethan's sake, definitely. And maybe for us, if there's still a chance." Her voice trembled on the last word. Lucas took a half-step closer, the warmth of her presence pulling him in. He reached up, brushed a stray hair from her cheek. She shivered at the touch, eyes flickering with memories, both painful and tender. "I'm not expecting miracles overnight," he murmured, his voice a quiet vow. "I just want to be here. We'll figure the rest out." She didn't move away. Instead, she let his hand linger, her own fingers reaching up to curl lightly around his wrist. The moment brimmed with emotion unspoken, a fragile possibility of rekindled intimacy. Then, as if recalling Ethan asleep just feet away, Rachel swallowed and slid her hand away from his. "Maybe we should head back to the living room," she whispered, a faint tremor in her tone. Lucas nodded, stepping back with a small, understanding smile. "Of course." They walked together, hush enveloping them. In the softly lit living room, Rachel sank onto the couch with an air of exhaustion. Lucas lowered himself beside her, leaving a respectful gap. Outside, the city's night hum was faint, drifting through a partially open window. For a while, neither spoke. The day's events, job fair frustrations, cooking dinner, bedtime routines, settled into memory, forging a shared sense of accomplishment and closeness. Eventually, Rachel cleared her throat. "Thank you for dinner," she said, voice subdued, "and for stepping up at the job fair and everything." He looked at her profile, noting how the lamplight caught the curve of her cheek. "You don't have to thank me," he answered. "I'm doing what a father should do, what I should have done from the start." She swallowed, eyes darting to him. "You're doing more than you realize," she murmured, tone edged with quiet emotion. "And I'm grateful." Silence wrapped around them once more. 100 questions flickered through Lucas's mind. Where do they go from here? Could they truly rebuild a relationship? Did she still love him? Or was this just about co-parenting? But the weight of the day pressed in, leaving him too drained to unpack every question tonight. He glanced at the clock. Nearly 9 p.m. "I should let you rest," he said softly. "It's been a busy day." Rachel nodded, though a faint flicker of disappointment crossed her features. "You sure you don't want to stay a bit longer? Sarah's not back yet, but I don't mind." His heart swelled at the invite, but he brushed his fingers through his hair, shaking his head slowly. I need to check on a few work emails, but how about I come by tomorrow? We can explore more daycare options or talk about your job leads. Her smile returned, soft and grateful. That would be good, thank you. I'd like that. They stood, walking to the door. Quietly, they opened it, and Lucas stepped into the hallway. For a fleeting beat, they lingered, two silhouettes in the narrow light. Rachel parted her lips as though to speak, but no words came. Instead, she leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek, a whisper of warmth that left him breathless. When she pulled back, her eyes shimmered with both hope and fear. "I'll see you tomorrow," she managed, voice unsteady. Lucas nodded, a surge of tenderness coursing through him. "Tomorrow," he promised, matching her whisper. With that, he turned and made his way down the hallway, leaving her standing in the doorway, heart pounding, thoughts swirling. Back in the quiet street, as he headed toward his waiting sedan, Lucas gazed up at the glow of the apartment windows. Inside that modest home slept a precious little boy and a woman who once owned his heart, maybe still did. The promise of tomorrow felt like a lifeline, a step toward mending what was broken. And so, with the city night stretching before him, Lucas Anderson felt that new thread of possibility tug at him, guiding him back to a life he thought lost, and a future he dared to hope for. Lucas arrived at Rachel's building the next morning feeling a swirl of nerves. Over the past 2 days, he had slipped into a routine so unfamiliar, morning phone calls to reschedule business obligations, afternoons spent immersed in Rachel and Ethan's world, and evenings overshadowed by cautious, tender moments between him and Rachel. It amazed him how quickly his life had pivoted, and yet he found himself craving more of this new existence. He pressed the buzzer at exactly 10 o'clock. A faint, static crackle, then Rachel's voice emerged, warm yet subdued. "Come on up." The front door clicked open. Lucas stepped inside, climbed the worn steps, and found her waiting in the hallway. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair swept back in a loose ponytail, a hint of fatigue under her eyes. "Hey," she greeted, offering a gentle smile. "Ethan's still in his pajamas, I'm afraid. He had a late night. We were FaceTiming with my aunt in Canada." Lucas smiled back. "Sounds fun. Don't worry, there's no rush." Rachel's expression softened. "Thanks, come on in." She led him into the apartment, where Sarah sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee. She lifted her cup in a silent greeting. Meanwhile, Ethan sprawled on the living room rug, zooming tiny cars across imaginary roads drawn on a sheet of paper. "Lucas!" Ethan exclaimed, bounding to his feet. "Look, I made a racetrack!" Lucas knelt to examine the roughly sketched lines, smiling. "That's awesome, buddy. Maybe later we can try building one with blocks too, if you have any." Ethan's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Yes, blocks. We'll make a big race place." Sarah set her mug down, glancing at Rachel. "I'm heading out in a few minutes. Got errands before work." She offered Lucas a nod. "Glad to see you again. Seems like you're making a habit of it." Lucas chuckled softly. "That I am." Rachel cleared her throat, busying herself with tidying a stray pile of mail. "So, I thought we could talk about some more daycares. I found a few others that might be less expensive or closer to the apartment, and I'm still waiting on calls from the jobs I applied to yesterday." She paused, lips pressing into a line. "Nothing yet, though." Lucas's gaze flicked to her face. He detected the discouragement there, even if she tried to hide it. "How about I hang out with Ethan while you check emails or make phone calls?" he suggested. "I know job hunting is time-consuming and you shouldn't have to manage everything alone." A surge of relief undercut by lingering pride flickered across Rachel's features. After a moment, she breathed out, nodding. "That would help," she admitted, voice measured. "I want to draft a fresh resume. Maybe email a few more leads." Before she could second-guess herself, Lucas flashed an encouraging smile. "Great. Meanwhile, Ethan and I can do the racetrack. Then maybe we'll all grab lunch?" Rachel nodded, the tension in her shoulders loosening. "Sounds like a plan. I'll just go set up my laptop." Sarah excused herself then, grabbing her handbag and heading for the door. With a quick wave goodbye, she disappeared, leaving only the three of them in the apartment. As soon as the door clicked shut, Ethan tugged on Lucas's hand, practically vibrating with impatience. "Let's build the track now," he pleaded, leading Lucas to a small crate overflowing with plastic blocks and mismatched toys. "We can do ramps and tunnels." Lucas knelt, rummaging through the crate to find pieces that might serve as ramps. Ethan chattered non-stop, describing how the cars would jump over lava pits and dodge scary monsters. Every so often he'd glance toward the kitchen where Rachel sat at the cramped table typing furiously on her laptop. Lucas could see the little crease in her brow that appeared whenever she was focused. They built a sprawling track across the living room floor, complete with arches and loops. Occasionally, Ethan would zoom his car through it, celebrating each successful pass with a triumphant cheer. Lucas couldn't help but grin at the boy's creativity, how every block became part of an epic story, how he had so much joy in these small moments. Time slipped by in a haze of childish laughter and the soft tapping of Rachel's laptop keys. Finally, after what felt like a pleasant eternity, Ethan flopped onto the couch, thoroughly entertained but clearly ready for something new. Lucas glanced at Rachel's direction. She had set her laptop aside, rubbing her temples. "How's it going?" he asked softly, crossing into the kitchen. She offered a half smile, shutting the laptop. "I sent out a few more resumes. Still no calls. It's only been a day, though, so I guess I have to be patient." Lucas leaned against the counter. "I know this isn't easy," he said quietly, "but you're doing all the right things. Something will come through. And in the meantime, let me help." She hesitated, as if weighing how much support to accept. "I might take you up on that," she finally admitted, voice subdued. "I'm really grateful, you know." Their eyes met, a gentle current of warmth passing between them, but before either could say more, Ethan patted over, holding his tummy. "I'm hungry," he announced. "Is it lunchtime?" Rachel glanced at the clock. 11:30, she exhaled. "We've got some sandwich stuff in the fridge unless you'd rather order something." Lucas shrugged, turning to Ethan. "Sandwiches sound good, buddy? Or do you want to go out for lunch?" Ethan brightened, but Rachel interjected, "We should probably not spend too much." She cut off abruptly, realizing the dynamic. Sandwiches are fine." Lucas offered a warm smile. "All right, let's do sandwiches here. I can whip something up. You relax for a bit." Ethan whooped, rushing to the fridge to try to grab the lettuce bag on his own. Rachel laughed, stepping in to help him. Within minutes, the three of them had assembled a surprisingly decent lunch. Simple sandwiches stacked with vegetables and deli meat, plus a small side of fruit that Lucas sliced while Ethan taste-tested the grapes. Once again, the kitchen bustled with an easy, familial closeness. They ate at the small table in the living room, Ethan swinging his legs under the chair. He recounted more elaborate details of his racetrack game, peppering Lucas with questions about how cars work. Rachel occasionally chimed in, her mood visibly lifted by the presence of both of them. There was a sense of normalcy in the air, a routine day without high drama, just gentle conversation and shared tasks. After lunch, Ethan insisted on showing Lucas a particular puzzle he'd been working on, a bright jumble of cartoon characters. Rachel decided to slip into her bedroom for a private phone call, presumably another job lead. Lucas watched her go, noticing the determination etched on her face, and silently prayed she'd get some good news. Ethan knelt on the floor, trying to fit puzzle pieces together. He kept glancing at Lucas, wanting both advice and approval. Lucas patiently guided him. "Try rotating that piece, or that one looks like a corner." The boy's brow wrinkled in concentration, but he grinned widely each time a piece clicked into place. Eventually, Rachel emerged from the bedroom. The look on her face made Lucas's heart sink. She seemed disappointed, shoulders sagging. "No luck," she murmured, confirming his unspoken guess. "They filled the position. Just found out." Ethan glanced up, confused but perceptive of her tone. "Mommy? Are you okay?" Rachel mustered a small smile, ruffling his hair. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just grown-up stuff." Lucas stood, crossing to her side. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "We'll keep looking." She nodded, exhaling. "Yeah, that's all I can do." A hush fell, broken only by Ethan's occasional puzzle piece clacks. Lucas debated whether to bring up his business connections again, worried about pushing her into a corner. Finally, he decided to tread carefully. "Would it help if you sent me your resume? Maybe I can pass it along to a couple of people I trust, see if they're hiring for a receptionist or admin role." Rachel's eyes flickered with both hope and uncertainty. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Maybe, if you're sure it won't be awkward." "I'm sure," Lucas said. "It's not a big deal. They're always looking for dependable staff, and you've got experience. If they can offer you an interview, that's all we can ask." She swallowed, then offered a grateful smile. "Thank you. I'll send it tonight." Relief coursed through him. His instincts told him that if Rachel could just get her foot in the door somewhere stable, the rest would start to line up, and if he could smooth out that path without overstepping, he would. He owed her that much at least. Ethan tapped Lucas's arm, pointing to the puzzle's empty center. "We need the last pieces," he declared, seriousness etched on his small face. Lucas chuckled, returning to the floor with the boy while Rachel took a seat on the couch, watching them with a faint smile. Piece by piece, they completed the puzzle, celebrating the final click with a small cheer. Rachel clapped her hands softly, snapping a quick photo of Ethan holding up the finished product. He practically glowed under the attention. Afternoon light streamed through the windows, the day ticking by in small moments of shared conversation and quiet tasks. In another life, Lucas would have felt restless, itching to return to phone calls and financial strategies. But here, time felt well spent, anchored in each minute he spent bonding with his son and supporting Rachel. He sensed the subtle shift in her posture, the way she caught his eye more frequently, as though trusting him a little more each passing hour. Around 3 o'clock, the door swung open and Sarah walked in, balancing a takeaway coffee and a tired expression. "Whew," she muttered, shedding her jacket. "Work was wild today. How's it going here?" Rachel gave a half shrug. "Another rejection," she admitted, forcing a light tone. "But Lucas helped with Ethan, so at least that's one less worry." Sarah shot Lucas a curious glance as though appraising his steadfast presence. "You must be some kind of saint," she teased, though not unkindly. "Sticking around for all this day-in, day-out stuff." Lucas simply smiled. "It's where I want to be." A moment of silence passed. Sarah arched an eyebrow, half smiling as she stepped further into the living room. "I'm glad," she said. "Rachel deserves all the help she can get, especially from the father of her child." Ethan, sensing the adults were talking about him, piped up. "Lucas is the best at building racetracks." Laughter rippled through the room, easing any lingering tension. Soon, Sarah retired to her bedroom for a quick nap, leaving the trio once again in a content bubble. By late afternoon, as the sun began slanting through the windows at a lower angle, Lucas realized he should probably slip away for a while to handle a few urgent tasks. But before he could broach the subject, Rachel spoke first. "Listen," she said, clearing her throat. "Thank you for everything today. It's been surprisingly nice, especially for Ethan." Lucas nodded, catching the subtle shift in her tone, like she was trying to steel herself. "It's been my pleasure." She hesitated, twisting her fingers together. "Would you like to stay for dinner again?" "Nothing fancy, but we could throw something together unless you have to get back to work or—" Her invitation trailed off, a slight vulnerability in her eyes. Lucas felt a surge of affection. "I'd love to," he answered without hesitation. "I just need an hour or two to handle some calls. Maybe I can come back around 6? Relief flooded her expression. "That works. I want to take Ethan to the park again, maybe give him some fresh air. Then we'll figure out dinner." Lucas made arrangements to leave, promising Ethan he'd return soon. The boy pouted, but a reassurance of "I'll be back for sure" calmed him. With a final wave, Lucas stepped into the hallway, heart tingling from Rachel's parting smile. Outside, the day's warmth lingered. He strode toward his waiting car, flicking through missed messages on his phone. Indeed, he had plenty of business to tend to, finalizing a key contract, checking finances for one of his branches overseas. Yet his mind was clearer than ever, determined not to let these tasks overshadow the real priority waiting back in that modest apartment. As the driver steered them through late afternoon traffic, Lucas allowed himself a small smile. He thought of Ethan's gleeful grin whenever a puzzle piece fit correctly, and Rachel's hushed thanks over the table at lunchtime. He thought of her fleeting touches, the soft look in her eyes that hinted at a trust slowly rebuilding. Yes, life was complicated. They still had so many hurdles to clear: public scrutiny, job hunts, old wounds. But for now, the day-by-day approach felt right. Tonight they'd share another meal in that cozy living room. Maybe he and Ethan would read a new story at bedtime. Maybe afterward he and Rachel would sit together, letting the hush of night nurture conversations they'd once left unfinished. And as for tomorrow, well, tomorrow would come soon enough. He glanced out the window at the skyscrapers glinting under the descending sun, and for the first time in a decade, Lucas Anderson felt genuinely at ease. He was forging a new path, not just in business but in family, and he had no intention of walking away. Late evening arrived, its hush settling over the narrow Brooklyn street in a gentle wave. From the outside, the building where Rachel and Ethan lived looked like any other unassuming complex. Brick walls, worn steps, windows glowing with warm, domestic light. But inside apartment 3B, a quiet transformation had been unfolding over the last few days, one that had guided Lucas Anderson from distant corporate titan to a man rediscovering simple, profound joys. He pushed open the door, balancing 2 grocery bags in his arms. In the living room, Ethan, fresh from an afternoon at the park, looked up and let out a cheer. "Lucas, you're back." "Hey, buddy," Lucas greeted, mustering a grin as he dropped the grocery bags onto the small kitchen table. He'd made good on his promise to return for dinner, arriving right on schedule at 6 o'clock. Though a part of him had worried that maybe Rachel might second-guess inviting him again, the sight of Ethan's excited face dispelled that fear. Rachel appeared from the hallway, hair slightly damp as if she'd just showered, wearing a cozy sweater and jeans. She gave Lucas a small but genuine smile. "Hey," she said quietly. "You brought more ingredients?" Lucas nodded, gesturing to the bags. "I picked up a few fresh things on the way. Figure we can make a simple stir-fry or something like that, unless you prefer I help with your own recipe?" She lifted her brows, impressed and a little amused. "Look at you, coming prepared. Stir-fry sounds great. I was just about to rummage in the fridge and see what we had." He removed a carton of chicken, some vegetables, and a small tub of pineapple chunks. "Thought we could do something sweet and savory, and I grabbed some rice, too." Rachel laughed softly. "Ethan loves pineapple in his food, so you're in luck. He'll devour it." She reached for the groceries, and for a second their hands grazed, sending a flicker of awareness through both of them. Neither pulled away too fast, but the moment passed, replaced by the practical matter of getting dinner started. Ethan busied himself in the living room, rummaging in his toy crate for figurines to stage a mini-adventure on the coffee table. Lucas glanced over periodically, making sure the boy was within sight and happily entertained. Meanwhile, he and Rachel moved around the kitchen with a comfortable familiarity, washing vegetables, slicing chicken into bite-sized chunks, heating oil in a single deep skillet. "Any news on your job search?" Lucas ventured gently, mindful not to pry too hard. Rachel blew out a breath. "I had one email from a small office in Midtown. They said they might have something opening up soon and to check back in a week. It's not a firm lead, but at least it's not a rejection." "Hey, that's progress," he offered, slicing a bell pepper with practiced care. "And if you want me to pass your resume around, I'm happy to." She nodded, stirring the skillet. "I emailed it to you this afternoon. I appreciate the help. I can't promise I'll accept a position through your connections if I don't feel comfortable. No offense." He smiled at her earnest tone. "No offense taken. You'll choose what's right for you." He paused, lowering his voice. "I just want you to know that if you need a reference or if you need to mention someone who can vouch for you, I'm here. And if a stable paycheck helps you and Ethan, I'm glad to be part of that solution." Her gaze flicked to him, gratitude mingled with caution. "Thank you," she said simply, turning back to the stove. The sizzling sound of chicken and vegetables filled the cozy space, releasing an enticing aroma. Before long, dinner was ready. A steaming stir-fry topped with sweet pineapple chunks, served over fluffy rice. The three of them gathered around the small living room table again, balancing plates on laps or using the single-end table as extra surface. It was undeniably cramped, but Lucas found the closeness comforting in a way he had never experienced at lavish dining tables in penthouse suites. Ethan was the first to dig in. Yummy," he announced with enthusiasm, chewing on a forkful of chicken and pineapple. "It's sweet," Lucas laughed, relieved. "Glad you like it, little man. I was hoping it wouldn't be too weird putting fruit in our dinner." Rachel shook her head, savoring her own bite. "No, it's perfect. Thank you." She glanced at Lucas, a warm look in her eyes. "You know, if someone had told me a week ago I'd have you making homemade meals here, I would have laughed in their face." He set down his fork, meeting her gaze. "I know. A week ago, I wouldn't have believed I'd be doing this either." He gestured to Ethan, who was now making a game of trying to skewer exactly one piece of pineapple and one piece of chicken at the same time. "But I can't imagine being anywhere else right now." Rachel's lips curved, something wistful in her expression. She dropped her gaze to her plate, and the moment throbbed with quiet understanding, neither entirely about the meal nor the day, but about the fragile new beginnings they were forging. They ate in relative contentment, Ethan frequently chiming in with random tidbits about dinosaurs and spaceships. After the plates were cleared, the boy insisted on dessert. Lucas, always prepared, had brought a small tub of vanilla ice cream. "We can't make a habit of sugar every night," Rachel teased, "or he'll never sleep." Ethan, of course, protested that he would definitely still sleep. The grown-ups compromised on small scoops for everyone. The homemade sundaes felt like a special treat, eliciting smiles all around. It was a quiet, joyful scene, a far cry from the lonely nights Lucas had spent in five-star hotels and from the anxious, penny-pinching nights Rachel had endured alone. Once the last bite was done, Ethan's energy began to crash. He leaned against Rachel, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy, can Lucas read me a story again?" Rachel smoothed down Ethan's hair, glancing at Lucas. "Only if Lucas isn't too tired. You've been playing personal chef all day." Lucas grinned, standing up. "I'm never too tired for story time." He extended a hand toward Ethan, who took it eagerly, leading the way to his small bedroom. Inside, the routine had become almost second nature. Ethan picked a new book, this time about a curious cat on a quest for magical shoes. Lucas settled by the bedside, reading aloud with whimsical voices. Rachel lingered in the doorway, arms folded, a tender smile curving her lips as she watched father and son bond. The hush of the small room, the rustle of turning pages, and Ethan's soft giggles gave the air a peaceful lullaby quality. Halfway through, Ethan's eyelids grew heavy. By the final page, he was yawning, clutching his teddy bear in a drowsy grip. Lucas closed the book, gently tucking the covers around Ethan's shoulders. The child blinked up at him with quiet trust. "Night, Lucas," he mumbled. Lucas's throat tightened. "Good night, buddy," he whispered back, patting Ethan's small hand. "Sweet dreams." He and Rachel tiptoed out, leaving the door slightly ajar. The living room lights were dimmed, the hush of evening even more pronounced now that Ethan was asleep. Rachel turned to Lucas, expression soft yet uncertain. "Want to sit for a bit?" she asked in a whisper. Lucas agreed, so they moved to the couch. Outside, the muffled sounds of traffic drifted through the window. A single lamp cast a warm glow around them, the rest of the apartment cloaked in cozy shadows. Rachel tucked her legs under her, facing Lucas in that close, intimate space. A heartbeat of silence passed before she spoke. "You've been amazing with him," she murmured, voice tender. "He's happier than I've seen him in a long time. I think a part of him always wondered if he'd ever really have a dad who stuck around." Lucas's heart clenched. "I'm sorry it took me so long to show up." She pressed her lips together, shaking her head. "We can't rewrite the past, but maybe we can figure out the future, right?" He reached for her hand, gently covering it with his own. "I'd like that." She exhaled, leaning back against the worn couch cushion. "I've been thinking about next steps," she began. "If you stay in New York a while, we could co-parent day to day. Ethan needs stability. I don't want him to get used to you just to watch you disappear when business calls you overseas." Lucas nodded, shoulders tensing at the truth of her words. "I can rearrange a lot," he promised. "My company runs whether I'm physically in the office or not. I'll have to travel occasionally, but I can keep it minimal. Maybe bring you both along sometimes, if that's possible." Her eyes glistened with a mixture of hope and vulnerability. "That's a big shift for you." "It is," he acknowledged, "but I realized something. All the success in the world feels empty if I don't have someone to share it with. Ethan and you are what I want to prioritize now." Rachel's throat worked on a silent swallow. "I'm scared," she admitted, so softly he almost didn't catch it. "Scared that we'll slip into old patterns or that you'll resent making these changes for us." He squeezed her hand, gaze earnest. "I won't resent it. This is my choice. And if old patterns threaten to resurface, we'll face them head on, with honesty." He paused, breath catching. "Rachel, I love seeing you like this. Strong, devoted to Ethan, determined to find your footing. I want to be part of your life, not just his. If you'll have me." For a long moment she didn't speak, eyes brimming with emotion. Then she moved closer, so close he felt the warmth of her breath. "I've missed you," she whispered, her voice shaky. "More than I'd admit to anyone, even myself. And as mad as I was, the anger faded a long time ago. All that's left is wanting to see if we can rebuild something, if we can be better than we were." Lucas's chest tightened with a rush of relief and longing. Slowly, gently, he raised his free hand to cup her cheek. She leaned into the touch, eyes fluttering shut for a heartbeat. Neither rushed the moment. Their past was rife with hurt, misunderstanding, shattered trust. Yet the bond they once shared still glimmered beneath the surface, refusing to die. Finally, she opened her eyes, and in that unguarded gaze he read acceptance. Hesitant, but real. He leaned in, testing the fragile space between them, and she met him halfway in a tender kiss. It was soft, laced with the bittersweet knowledge of lost time and the slow, cautious promise of a second chance. Her fingers curled into his shirt, trembling as though she too felt the weight of what they were risking and the sweetness of what they might gain. When they drew apart, the hush of the apartment felt electric. Rachel let out a small, shaky laugh, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. "Wow," she breathed. That feels like a long time coming." Lucas touched his forehead to hers, heart pounding. "Yeah, I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you on the plane." She closed her eyes, inhaling unsteadily. "I guess we take it one day at a time," she whispered. "For Ethan. For us." He kissed her temple, voice resolute. "One day at a time. Together." They lingered on the couch, curled into each other as the lamp's glow flickered softly. Beyond the window, the city continued its nightly hum, but in that small apartment they found a quiet corner of belonging. Neither pretended the future would be easy. There would be press speculation once word got out, more job rejections for Rachel, times Lucas would need to travel. They'd have to navigate trust issues, shared parenting decisions, and the scars of their past. But that night, hope prevailed over fear. A soft noise from the hallway broke their reverie. Ethan stirring, perhaps in a dream. Rachel rose to check on him, and Lucas followed quietly, standing at her shoulder as they peeked into the dim room. The little boy slept on, teddy bear clutched tight, his face serene. Rachel glanced at Lucas, her eyes shining with unspoken emotion. In that moment, they both understood what they were fighting for, a chance to give Ethan the stable, loving family he deserved, and maybe to reclaim a love they'd nearly lost. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but a fragile, living possibility, one that would require work, grace, and unwavering commitment. They returned to the living room, hand in hand. Eventually, Lucas would head back to his hotel, promising Ethan he'd return the next day. Eventually, Rachel would resume her relentless job search in the morning. But for now, they settled into the hush of the apartment, side by side, hearts beating in quiet sync. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.